7, and 8, if we can go consent on those. We have a quorum for the Budget and Finance, Mr. Weezer, Mr. Smith, and myself, Bernard Parks as the chair. So if we can move those 3 items, we'll then recess this meeting and go to the joint meeting so that we can address items 1 and 2. Okay? So move those 3 items on consent, 6, 7, and 8. We will recess the Budget and Finance Committee. Now we'll open the joint meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee, and we have a quorum for Budget and Finance, Mr. Smith, Mr. Weezer, and myself. And Mr. Zine, you would like to open up for the Personnel Committee.
Well, we have a quorum for the Personnel Committee, myself and Mr. Parks. Is Mr. Koretz going to be here? He's not going to be here, okay. So we have the 2 items that we are going to be reviewing under the Joint Committee report. And if we can go with item number 1 first, Mr. Clerk?
Item 1 is the City Controller and City Administrative Officer report relative to resource shortage of accounting and financial reporting personnel. The Audits and Governmental Efficiency Committee waived consideration of the above matter.
Thank you. Please identify yourself and...
I'm Maria Gutierrez with the CAO's office.
Claire Bartels, with City Controller.
Bill Lamb with the City Controller.
Take it away.
We were asked to report on a request of the Controller's Office for additional funding for a package they have put together to address a resource shortage of accounting and financial and reporting personnel. I would like to defer to the Controller's Office to make their presentation.
Certainly. Thank you.
We're passing it down as it gets to Mr. Lamb.
No, we're... Mr. Lamb and I are here together. Thank you for this opportunity to be heard today. It's come to our attention that as a result of the necessary austerity measures that were taken over the past year to save the city general fund money, that we have had an enormous reduction in accounting and financial staff throughout the city. We took a look at, we compared filled positions citywide through looking at who was employed 2 years ago in the accounting series in primarily general fund departments, and find that we have, since 2008, experienced nearly a 30% reduction in accounting resources. The numbers simply justify or substantiate the realization that we have been experiencing in the Controller's Office with our recent submittal of receiving financial information from city departments has started to come in slower this past year. Processing payments, processing city payroll, everything is impacted by everything that the controller performs and must perform is impacted by the lack of personnel citywide. So we came up with the idea, or accepted the responsibility for suggesting a oversight of a pool of temporary city employees, that is formerly retired city employees that have expertise in financial systems, financial matters, that we would bring back as a stopgap resource as needed over the primarily the next 6 months, because we feel it's a particularly vulnerable time. We're putting together the city's financial reports right now. We need to make certain that the CAFR is submitted on time. There will be substantial penalties if our financial reports are delayed. But we also have the anticipated go-live of the Financial Management System, FMS, next July 1, and all of these things are an additional impact above and beyond the day-to-day accounting operations of the city that we cannot jeopardize. So we want to suggest that for the period beginning January 1st, that the controller utilize the database that we've already compiled of retired employees that have fiscal accounting experience, that as we recognize a need in the departments citywide and the controller's office on an interim basis to bring in these specialized retirees and place them up to 90 days, but not necessarily for the complete 90 days, to fulfill the various accounting requirements. Hopefully then to not miss any deadlines, not err in our significant operations that, regardless of the size of the city's workforce, really have not diminished in need or demand.
Okay. So what happens when the police department and the fire department come with the same request? What do we tell them?
Civilian accounting, all departments would be considered.
Responsibilities that those departments have to deliver the service. See, the concern I have, all departments have responsibility to deliver service. The controller's office. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. The police department, the fire department, library, Rex and Parks, all of them have that
The record reflect
responsibility.
Mr. Rosendahl is
Yeah.
With a loud entrance. Thank you,
Just in
Mr.
case There's
Rosendahl.
any questions?
Leave it, they wouldn't let me shut the door.
So what happens is, with the ERIP program, people took the retirement, and I assume that we're talking about folks that have taken retirement through the normal process or through the early retirement system.
Either way, yes.
Okay, so now we bring those folks back, and there's a condition that we were only going to bring so many back. That was part of the agreement when ERIP was put into place. Are we going to live true to that agreement?
Yes, we would not be, what we're suggesting is not to backfill the positions, but just deploy people on a very limited basis.
Up to 90 days, though.
Up to 90 days, potentially. We envision, based on the last year's experience when we were talking through if we had already instituted something like this, we saw opportunities this past year where we could have utilized the same retiree for a period of time in more than one department. And in fact, that's where we think we'll be more, we can maximize the use of our retirees better this way than perhaps tends to be the case where people bring back a retiree for one particular project or department,
More
and they
versatile.
use their entire 90 days. Much more versatile, flexible, and in our office, it's sort of where the buck stops in the cycle of all things accounting. So we do have the vantage point of seeing the ebb and flow and the most risky areas throughout the city of accounting problems. So we, for instance, if we know when we're doing the departmental user testing for the financial management system project, so we might bring someone in for the testing period where the department has a shortfall, but then use them for fiscal year-end closing in another department. Different needs, different skill sets of the retirees are going to be matched up with the with the shortfalls in the departments.
And you mentioned a 30% reduction in resources. You mean 30% reduction in personnel assigned to the controller
Not assigned to the controller, citywide,
citywide?
in the general fund departments. Exhibit,
The reduction for the controller's office, how many is that?
actually, that was close to 30% as well, from early retirement, just alone.
Just early retirement, which was a program to clear funds for the general fund, to keep the general fund alive, and to have those folks take that retirement package, which many of them did. The compensation and benefits, what type of compensation and benefits are we talking about with these folks that are going to come back, if they're approved?
They come back without benefit, just for pay, based on the position level that they are brought back on. They would be compensated on an hourly basis. Take Mr. Lamb here, for example.
And that schedule would be the same as they received when they were working, or would it be higher or less?
It's the same, basically the salary for the classification they were in at this point.
So whatever salary they were receiving before, they receive that salary excluding benefits,
Excluding
since
benefits.
they already have the benefits on the pension.
Retiree.
Okay, now my other question is, what do we tell these other departments that have similar requests? That say, we need these personnel, end of the year is coming, we need to get these folks in for that, we need to get these folks in to do the budget. Many departments are down a lot of personnel. How do we favor one department over other departments? How do we say the controller is more important than these other departments that have a vital service?
We're actually not thinking of ourselves, we're not,
Yeah, I know you're not being selfish, but I'm just looking at the broad scale when other departments come forward to say, wait, this is a great idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying, how do we justify it and tell the next department, no, we can't do it for you, but we did it for controller. We
No.
can't do it for animal services, but we can do it for the
Right.
controller.
okay. We anticipate that departments will come forward to us with a need if we don't approach them first. I actually believe we are ready to pinpoint areas that need temporary assistance, But for those that come forward, it is going to be for us to take on the tough job of saying, no, we don't think this particular need is is best met through our pool of retired employees. I suppose they could be pursuing a backfill request altogether separate from us through the managed hiring process. There are other tools at department's disposal if they have the funding and so forth. We're only limiting ourselves here, not really to solving the problem on a long-term basis, but really to fill an immediate, our threshold or our measuring criteria will be the amount of risk if a certain function doesn't get filled, and realizing there's only so many resources to be divided amongst all the departments. We in the Controller's Office are actually utilizing our own personnel to assist departments to the degree possible. Financial reporting, we're approaching our own, rather than just asking departments for information, we are working with departments to help them as it is. So we're supporting them no matter how we need to complete our reports on time. So this would just add another tool for us to deploy to make sure the job gets done for the city. But we will also be rejecting.
If I may, the CAO has taken a look at the controller's request, and the audits committee asked us to look into what the potential consequences could be if there is a delay in the auditing reporting, the single audit reporting. The potential consequence is that we could jeopardize our federal funding.
So I'm not disputing that. But I'm talking about other departments within the city that have similar needs and are going to come forward with similar. This is the first time I've heard this type of request since we did the ERIP. So I'm looking ahead to say, what do we tell these other departments that say, we've got to do the budget's coming around for next fiscal year, we've got to close the books, it's the end of the calendar year, we don't have the personnel. I'm looking ahead to say, how do we balance this? How do we manage this so it's fair to all people? Because whether you're working for the fire department, the police department, or some other department, those general managers have responsibility and timelines and federal grants and state grants. I mean, it's all one big bag.
Exactly, which is why we will be deploying to those departments. We won't be filling our own positions first and foremost. This is exactly that need, to see that there's a enormous hole in one department over another. We would be the decision maker to deploy that particular retiree with that skill set. If there's two competing departments with the same need, probably we would actually utilize that same person for both departments.
So you would then be able to assist these other departments that need to have this expertise, not just for the controller's office.
Absolutely.
But a department that has a request and need goes to the controller's office, and the controller's office would then decide, we can share this responsibility, this, that, or the other. They wouldn't have to come from managed hiring. They'd be able to do it and coordinate through your office.
Correct, only on this limited basis.
Basically through the end of this fiscal year.
That's correct. We'd like to, hopefully this is the reason it's critical, as I said, with FMS going, particularly critical, with FMS going live in July, it gives us an opportunity to pilot, if you will, this new approach. I believe hasn't been done before. And if successful, we would propose to do it probably for the first 6 months of the next fiscal year as well. But again, built into this is reporting back to your committees and the council to make sure that it is working fairly and is working to meet the deadlines required for the city.
It would strictly be in the financial arena of the departments and their responsibilities.
It is.
All departments.
We're only stepping up to the plate to take on the financial, the accounting world of things, but we do mention in our report that I think it's worth mentioning that we also need the IT folks that are supporting the financial systems. Without that, we citywide have a problem as well, but we are only asking for administrative oversight of the pool of people that have accounting financial experience.
And the total you're asking for is $500,000?
We are asking for seed funding for $500,000.
The CAO is recommending, in light of the competing demands on the budget balancing account, that amount actually be reduced to $250,000.
It's already been cut in half. You're not even out of the room. And
there are a lot of competing
money
demands
for the program. And how long would that sustain them?
Well,
At 250 versus 500.
It's really going to depend on the department that is in need of the assistance. and the available funding that they may have and how many departments are going to be using this. What we are going to do is we're going to be tracking this throughout the year in the financial status report. Ideally, a department that would require the assistance would be able to reimburse the controller's office for the services provided. In the event that they can't, then we would be dipping into this $250,000 appropriation. But it's something that until departments start using this list, that we're not going to know exactly how much.
So if this is approved, then you can expect all the departments that lack this resource to come knocking on the door.
All the departments sitting behind me now? Yes, probably.
Well, I'm not criticizing the concept. I like the idea. I'm just saying, how are we going to be able to manage? And if it's being cut from 500 recommendation to 250, and maybe started out at that for a 3-month period of time, and maybe see if the requests are exceeding or the requests are reasonable, and it's managing itself. We haven't tried it, so we don't know how extensive it's going to be and how many resources are going to be deployed.
Part of the issue facing the city is accounting in the city is a process, and it starts with the departments, it runs through the controller. We're still processing $7 to $8 billion worth of transactions a year. So we're processing stuff going out and revenue coming in. The treasurer at any given time, because of the pool nature, will have $6 billion in cash on hand. These are very liquid assets, and we have a group of competing priorities. We've got payroll, we've got revenue recognition, we've got vendor payments, we've got the new financial system, we have financial reporting, we have the new work that we're doing on the accounts receivable subsystem of the financial system. All areas that most of which flow through the general fund. So what we've done is we've reduced the staffing in the general fund, but to some extent we have not reduced the responsibilities, because with the system you've got the same level of responsibilities.
So we're just delaying? We're delaying the reports or the projects?
We can't delay the project because there's so many things that we need out of the project to be able to provide information. You know, right now, for example, we can't tell with any certainty what the status of the general fund is versus the status of the special purpose funds. One of the goals for the new system is to be able to do that. The new technology provides capabilities and flow processing that we don't have now, in addition to which one of the goals is to put all departments on cost accounting so that we have better financial information. So we've got this area where we still have to make payments, we still have to safeguard city financial assets, which in many cases are very liquid, and we have to prepare for these new systems and continue to maintain the other systems, because we're looking at not only the financial system, but all of the subsidiary systems, the payroll, the LA tax, the SMS, the other systems that help safeguard these assets.
Okay. Have we done any exploration to see the numbers? We talked about 30%. Do we have a number of bodies, 100, 200, 300, of what we would need in resources? Personnel that we would bring back? Any estimated numbers?
No, we do not have estimated numbers of full-time equivalents. We haven't looked at it that way. We've identified a number of departments where we believe they will need the most help based on the amount of resources depleted through various means over the last 2 years. But no, we have not yet. We have begun to utilize the database itself. We went ahead and compiled this about 5 months ago, actually, and are continuing to build it. And we've utilized it through the traditional lengthy process. Most recently, I believe the Budget and Finance Committee approved for the SMS system, and we were able to identify the right personnel because we'd compiled all this data. So we believe the pieces are there to make this work well. We need the flexibility and versatility to deploy it to see that it gets us through the rest of the fiscal year.
Any survey or any inquiry to see how many retirees would be interested in something like this?
We do. That is our database. With no offer of a position or no certainty of a position, the controller sent out a letter about 6 months ago, I believe, or
Inquiring.
maybe less, inquiring their, all retirees. We worked with Lacers that appeared to be in the accounting series. We identified all the position classifications and asked if they were interested in the future in coming back on a temporary basis, please familiarize us with the types of systems, knowledge, and experience that they'd had. So that is how we compiled the database.
So you have a database
We have
of interested
Of
persons?
several hundred people right now, and we recently did an updated mailing. I expect I'll get some more feedback.
Okay. Mr. Park?
Thank you. Mr. Smith? you have it?
I wanted to ask a question, I just asked Mr. Parks, he'd have the same question, is, do we have to pay the people the same rate they got when they were here to bring them back?
The answer is no. You can actually bring them back, a person back at a different classification, as long as it's within their same
Because they're already
series.
getting benefits, they're off salary, so they're getting their retirement benefits. So this is like a double dipping plan. This allows people to come back, it's what it is. They're allowing people to come back to work. So why do we have to offer them at that rate? Why can't we say, hey, if you want to come back and do some piecemeal work for us, we'll pay you, but not the rate you're accustomed to?
We could offer them so long as they belong in that category, then you can bring them, we could, in theory, bring them
I
back.
think what we're saying, the CEO is saying, we just can't afford to pay the whole thing the way you want to do it. Maybe this is a way to save that. And you come back and offer a lower rate, say for those that want to come back, you're already getting your pension. If you want to come back and help us out, we'll pay you a little cash to do that too. Someone's going to be on a pension in 7 months, I would take that. I'd rather get the salary I'm getting now, but I'll take, I'd come back and do some piecemeal work.
Hourly rate.
Yeah, hourly rate, yeah.
It will end up being up to the individual who gets an offer. If they were a senior accountant 2, if the offer is for a senior accountant 1. I mean, it is up to the individual. I mean, this is designed to sort of be a short-term measure. I mean, we have the FMS project, we have other accounting, transactional work that needs to be completed. Certainly anything that's on a long-term basis, for example, if the department has issues, paying the bills, basically, paying, doing payroll. I mean, that's a long-term issue that we are going to have to address to the budget, and certainly that probably would not be appropriate for this particular mechanism, and certainly we need to look at some long-term solutions.
But it's a bridging action, and you said it's allowing you flexibility.
Right.
You can have people doing different things, different places. Then show some flexibility in salaries, I think is what I'm saying. It might help you get more bang for the buck.
Right, I think we can take a look at what's possible.
And let me ask one more question along those lines. There's different grades. There's like the starting accountant, the interim accountant, the supervising accountant. With the police department, they've got the policeman 1, 2, 3, supervisors, different ranks, and each rank receives higher compensation. Are we looking at bringing the workers in? Or are we looking at bringing the supervisors in to supervise the workers, or it's just going to be the workers, which obviously would be at a lower pay grade than the supervisors at a higher pay grade, who are supervising these folks? In other words, people who are actually going to be hands-on doing something, or are we going to bring in supervisors who will be supervising the folks that we're bringing in to do the work? You follow what I mean?
I do follow what you mean. Thus far, the needs that we have identified where we would be bringing someone in have all been workers. They're at varying levels, though. It could be the accounting clerk level. It could be, for data entry. It could be any level, honestly. This isn't conceived to rule out supervision, but it's whatever piece is missing in order to get the job done. Financial reporting, very different than payroll or payments to vendors. So it would cover the whole gamut. But
I'd just be cautious that you don't overload it with supervisors
right,
at the sacrifice of the folks that are actually doing the job.
absolutely.
Because like you've got mechanics are doing the hands-on, then you got supervisors who are supervising the mechanics. Well, you've got to have supervisors, obviously, but maybe some of the existing supervisors could supervise those folks that are coming back familiar with the operations. Because sometimes I'll see a deployment where I see 4 officers and 5 supervisors. Well, all due respect to supervisors, I'd rather have 9 officers and 1 supervisor in those functions, especially on a limited basis.
The objective certainly is not to build up or to rebuild up the workforce to any prior level concept. It is to get particular specific jobs done that present the highest risk if we do not get that job done.
Okay.
So whomever it would take.
Okay.
Smith, you have anything? Was it?
Bill?
Roosevelt? Let me just ask a couple of questions. Is that When we look at this issue of the bridge balancing fund, what was the amount in it and how much is it remaining?
The actual line item,
Yes.
the entire amount,
Just 8 million plus.
so the actual line item is $13 million.
13. Okay. And other than, I know there's several items in item 3 that talks about moving. Have we used much of it before we get to item 3, or is it pretty much the 13 million?
Currently, the balance, the original balance of that line item was 13.4 million. We've transferred money for SMS in a past report for 1.7 million, and we anticipated and set aside $500,000 for this purpose.
So you said we've already used 7 for SMS?
1.7 million.
What is that?
1.7 million for SMS.
Okay. So that, okay. Let me ask also on the, let's see, what are the requirements in the sense of the charter section 1164? Is that the provisions that just gives the mayor the authority to bring people back?
Correct. They would, so the pool of people we envision using would be, we would ask that the entire pool be brought back in name only, without salary or position, under the charter section by the mayor's authority, so that the only step remaining, when we identify the particular position needed, the particular salary to be paid, would be to get a substitute authority for that position through the CAO.
Okay. Would it alter the process of using that charter section if you went to personal service contracts, if you had a variety of pay scales and chose to pay less than their exiting salary? Would you still use that charter section?
What you're proposing sounds like an alternative possibility that would be a lot more cumbersome, I would imagine, to set up a
Just using
personal
the same
service.
example Mr. Smith used, is if you pay them less, would you use the charter section to bring them back, or would you just merely go into a personal service contract for the less pay? Because it appears, I'm assuming that the charter section requires they be brought back at their salary that they left. Is that part of it?
No, I don't, it does not require that they be brought back just at a position that they have, and they have held or are entitled to held. Is that correct?
Right, and then, as far as using the charter section, is there a length of time?
90 days maximum in a fiscal year. It would not be a foregone conclusion that each individual would be brought back for the complete 90 days. In fact, with the limited resources, we are looking at maximizing one person for 90 days in more than one area, or multiple people for less than 90 days.
And let me ask the CAO, because there's so many fragmented parts of this, and you don't know what departments that have money to pay, what's the rationale for moving $250,000 as opposed to giving them a cap and allowing some of this to flush itself out between now and the January mid-year?
I think it was a number that we were comfortable with, recognizing that we're working basically against this March 31st deadline with for the CAFR. Certainly, if you know, that is why in conversations with the department, we agree that we would certainly look at this when they submit their FSR to see what kind of impact this has on their budget. And when the Controller's Office makes the request for the sub-authority, we would be looking at this closely to see what department is involved and who it is that they're bringing back.
Let me, I think we exhausted, we just had, is it Alan Peskick? Just submitted a card for item 1. Why don't you come on up? You can sit on the far end here.
First of all, thank you, members of council, for allowing me to speak and listening to this plan here. It kind of worries me. I don't see why we couldn't bring back people who have been laid off, who are working at a lower step, who have already been trained in doing what needs to be done. You want to bring back people who have retired, who are reaping the benefits of the E-RIP, and leaving out those who really need the money. Also, aren't some of those the ones that overlooked $640 million? Plus maybe another $540 million that came out in the news? Can we trust them? Bring back people we can trust. Thank you.
Thank you. I realize all of you are enthusiastic, but in this committee, what we try to do is just stay on point, and if you want to applaud, we'd ask you to go outside. But this just delays the ability to get to the factual circumstances, so appreciate your enthusiasm. Let me just ask, have you considered people that are laid off?
We have not compiled a database of people that have been laid off. We could certainly talk to Personnel Department as to how to do that. We have not.
Okay. Let me just say this, is that in looking at this item, and I'm assessing that we move it with the recommendations of the CAO for the $250,000, but that we ask the controller and the CAO to evaluate the issue of having more flexible hourly rates, and also to look at layoffs as a pool in addition to those that are retired. That we also ask the CAO in the mid-year FSR to evaluate a more permanent and long-term solution to this problem as opposed to this interim or pilot. And so that we ask those items, if anybody has anything else to add.
I got one more question.
I think it's great.
I got one more question on that furlough. Are any of the controller staff on furlough?
Yes. The EAA represented people are roughly 67% of ours, and so their furlough plan has been changed, but the remainder of the staff is on furlough today.
And how much furlough are we talking about?
10%?
10%? We could look at that.
I'm sorry, 10% per individual on furlough.
10%. We should also, in addition to what Mr. Parks has mentioned, see if some modification can be made with the folks that are on furlough, if that could help free up personnel for what we're talking about. In other words, that one gentleman talked about people who've been laid off, who want to come back to work, versus folks who are collecting a pension, who can get extra dollars to come back, versus those that need those dollars, employment, to have a job, and then those that are on furlough who are already here. If that combination could be put into play, in other words, give the resources you need with the limited funding, the $250,000, to try and accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, and try and be as creative as we can with the folks that have been laid off who are good, competent employees. And if the furlough plan could be modified to assist in that endeavor, in other words, throw everything in and see which one's going to work to try and stretch those 250 to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Because I think once word gets out to the departments, you're probably receiving a lot of requests, and it may overwhelm the number of requests that the departments need to get the financial reports in line, especially as we come up to the budget situation and the next fiscal year. Great ideas. It was an easy request to have 500. That's been cut to 250 with the approval of this committee in a moment, and then to try and see if these other components can help do what we need to get done until we can come up with something permanent.
If I may, we will work with personnel to find out whether anyone actually has been vacated from the appropriate classes. To answer your question, I believe most of the classes are actually part of EAA, where now we have an agreement, and so they are not being furloughed. They just have the 10 unpaid holidays, and so that issue for the most part, has been removed.
Okay.
I do think, just to add a recommendation, just to it was implied in the report, but just to formalize, and that would be for the controller to basically send a list of the potential retirees to the mayor for his approval.
Thank you. That's a good idea.
And then also, could we have the clerk give a brief explanation of what Charter Section 1164, the provisions, so that we could have that in the committee report. So with those recommendations, we'll move this item.
Actually, sir, actually on that point too, the city attorney here can weigh in on that, but I do note, per the ERIP ordinance, we are not allowed to bring people back on personal services without specific mayor and council approval.
I think from all the recommendations made today, they're within the scope of what's legal and also binding on contracts and MOUs that have been negotiated. So that's the rationale that we'll push that forward and ask that you look at those several items with those limitations. Okay.
And this will go to, with this recommendation to the council, and we can get some of those answers, hopefully,
By then?
before it goes to council.
So do we get a unanimous move with those recommendations?
Yes.
So both
Just,
committees
one-
are unanimous on
One question, if I may. I just want to make sure that what is moving forward, in addition to your amendments, is the CAO recommendations,
Yes.
as that is the most recent report.
We removed the CAO's recommendation of $250,000 with those amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Unanimous.
Unanimous.
Thank
Thank you very much. Before we go to item 2, just to make sure if anyone wants to speak on any item in the committee, you get your cards in early because we like to have the public comment first before the staff comes up. So we're going to item 2. We have several cards, and come up Simboa Wright, Victor Gordo, and Robert Hunt. Oh, that's okay. And we have a fourth one, Cheryl Parisi, and then Julie Butcher is in the warm-up.
The
area.
overflow.
Colleagues, on this item, after public comment, if there are issues that we need to discuss in closed session, we have that opportunity. So there were several issues that were discussed in Personnel Committee that prompted that discussion. So after the public comment, we can make a determination if we want to go into closed session.
And we can have the clerk please read the item.
Yes, item 2 is the City Administrative Officer and Personnel Department joint report relative to changes to the health care plans offered through this Civilian Modified Flexible Benefits Program.
Hi, my name is Simboya Wright. I work for the City of Los Angeles, of course, as a wastewater collection worker. I came to the City of Los Angeles because they said it was an equal opportunity and it was a great place to work, which it is. And I'm very proud of working here. It's disturbing to hear that the city wants to change benefits for the employees. I have 3 kids. One of my oldest son had to have surgery, almost died. And with like I said, I came here for the benefit. I'm sorry, I'm a little disturbed just thinking about it. But I came here for the benefits. I used to work for another government entity, and I thought the city was better. But I don't know what's happening. What happened? What's going on with our city leaders? Why are they trying to put the pressure on the city employees? We're the ones that's out doing all the work that makes this city look so good and makes the visitors want to visit this city. What happened to the greatness of the city of Los Angeles? What happened to our leaders? We look to you guys. I elected you guys. I voted. I live in the city was raised here, but live in District 8. And I'm very proud of where I live and where I was raised. And I just want you guys to continue to be leaders. Lead us, and make sure that the city stays the great city that it is, and not mess over the city employees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council, Victor Gordlo, General Counsel for Labor's International Union North America, Local 777, and here also with Coalition of LA City Unions. The position of our membership is that all parties who joined this Joint Labor Benefits Management Committee are bound by the committee's decisions. In this case, the JLMBC is the only body that can make changes to the plan design. The matter was presented to the JLMBC and it was defeated. We added in your packet the policies of the JLMBC committee. And if you look at page 3 of attachment 1, you'll notice that the policy is very clear. The committee is vested with the right and may vote on and pass or defeat any properly made motion. What this means is that if a motion is made, properly made before the JLMBC, and it's voted on, it either pass or is defeated. Nothing is left for the city council to decide. In this instance, the city is taking a position that is in complete opposite of the position they took when the JLMBC issue in the parking MOU went to the Employee Relations Board. The city's position in that case was that all parties were bound by the joint labor by the parking MOU JLM agreement. We don't know how it's different in this case. The city can't have it both ways. In one instance, argue that when we sign an agreement, we negotiate an agreement, and we are bound by the rules in that agreement. But in this instance, the city is saying, no, we are not bound. So we would ask that you not move to unilaterally impose and that you live up to the agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
Thank you.
Could Ms. Butcher come and sit in your seat there? Thank you.
Where's Julie? Julie Butcher?
Good afternoon. Robert F. Hunt, counsel for SEIU Local 721. I just want to follow up on what Mr. Gordo relayed. I think the question before you is whether the city can unilaterally implement changes in the benefit plans that have a financial impact on our members. And our view is that you cannot unilaterally implement those, that those are clearly subject to bargaining. As already laid out in the materials before you, the enabling ordinance back in the 80s, which created the Joint Labor Management Benefit Committee, the rules of that benefit committee clearly specify a procedure to either increase or decrease changes in the benefit plans. All of the different coalition MOUs have expressed language within their MOU saying that benefits shall be provided as, and any changes as recommended by the Joint Labor Management Committee. So we find no legal basis which would enable the city to just unilaterally make changes that affect them. And clearly the proposals in front of you today would have a financial effect upon our members. So that I'll defer to. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Parisi. I'm the Executive Director of AFSCME District Council 36, Chair of the Coalition of City Unions, and Labor Chairperson of the Joint Labor Management Benefits Committee. I come to you today to ask in the strongest possible way, do not move forward on this proposal. Do not effectively blow up what has been one of the most responsible and cost-saving joint labor management committees in the city of Los Angeles. This committee was created over 21 years ago and has worked responsibly and collaboratively to produce for the city of Los Angeles the lowest cost benefit plan of any other plan in the city. The average per employee cost is $200, on average, $200 less per employee than comparable plans at the Department of Water and Power or plans provided for police and fire. Overall, what that means is that the city is enjoying effectively $60 million worth of savings every year as a result of the solid collaborative work that the Joint Labor Management Committee has produced over the last 21 years. Let me just talk specifically about that. The Joint Labor Management Committee deals aggressively with providers. Last year, when you were in budget deliberations, you heard early reports that Blue Cross had come to the city of Los Angeles seeking an over 24% rate increase. Kaiser had come to the city of Los Angeles seeking a rate increase of excess of 9%. It was the labor side of that committee that worked aggressively with these providers. We basically sit on similar committees in other jurisdictions. They understand that they see our faces everywhere. And we said, the city of Los Angeles is in trouble. You are a longtime partner, and you must be responsive. Those providers heard that message from us. Those providers reduced the rates. Blue Cross came down from over 24% to around 9%. Kaiser from over 9% to 6.3%. We produce in a collaborative fashion. In addition,
Could you,
this is an important matter, and I'm going to wrap up quickly.
so the first three...
We administer these plans, again, to ensure that we get maximum bang for the buck. These plans are administered without brokers, without administrative fees. Virtually every dollar that's paid for health dollars goes into the benefit of workers in these plans. And in summary, let me just say this to you. The proposal before you, I will, this is my last sentence. The proposal before you will save $3.25 million in a plan that is over $200 million annual plan. I would ask for you to consider the proportionality of what you're attempting to do, to effectively blow up a responsible and well-functioning committee to save what is in less than 1% of savings.
Thank
The
you.
consequences are huge. The savings are relatively de minimis. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Julie Butcher, SEIU 721, also part of the coalition. We urge you today to not act to make this unilateral change, again, to save $3 very important million, however, at the expense of long-term savings, to put at risk the solid work we've done together to provide basic benefits in the most cost-effective way possible. Together, we've worked hard to control costs and to provide basic benefits. The alternative is to go back to bargaining benefits the way we used to when we did it unit by unit, bargaining unit by bargaining unit. And with all due respect, that specter allows the providers of benefits to eat us collectively alive. It has been our work together that has kept costs at bay. The last time that the issue of whether or not a labor management committee is binding on the parties came up, these unions stood with this city in opposition to, at that time, a union that opposed the overall decision of a labor management committee. We stood with you, contrary to the hallmarks of brotherhood, to support your action, arguing that the collective action of a labor management committee was compelling. That's the same circumstance today, and we would expect the city to take the same position, that the rules are the rules without regard for what it is that the outcome wants to be. In that case, the issue was around police officers paying for parking for motorcycles. We supported the city. We worked with the same city attorney and actually testified in that situation. So we would ask you to be at least vaguely consistent, but mostly to think about the long term at the expense of the short term.
Okay. Let me ask, Ali, as we did in personnel, I think many of these issues are going to have to be discussed in closed session, particularly this issue of advisory versus mandatory. So if you have any questions of the four labor leaders that are at the table now, we can address that, and then before we go to closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Parks.
And Alan, we'll get to you as soon as we finish this question.
When this was heard in Personnel Committee, we, at that time, said for the city and the coalition to sit down and further discuss it, and then we continued to this joint meeting today. Have there been any discussions with the city representatives between the last Personnel Committee meeting and today?
Well, there continued to be meetings. For example, at our last Joint Labor Management Benefits Committee, which was last Thursday, the parties voted to move out for an RFI so that we can solicit the best ideas from the provider community to with the goal of redesigning our plans with an eye toward most cost-effective benefit delivery. And so we are working together. There has not been, and we continue to work together in the context of this committee. That's why we ask so vigorously that you not upset and basically throw us into litigation.
Upset the apple cart. But I just want to publicly state to both of you, Victor, to union folks, that I appreciate the patience that you've had. You've been working with the city for a long time, and we recognize that. The council members recognize that. I don't know if the people of LA recognize that it's been a relationship where we're working together trying to accomplish in very tough financial times. So I don't want to disrespect the part that you folks have been a partner in many, many issues. As you mentioned, the rates that were going to go up, and there was a lot of lobbying not to have them go up as they did, and other issues that have come up. So I don't want you to think that we've disregarded and shown disrespect of the relationship that's been established. And I go back to the time there was ACE, all city unions, and they had the coalition working in that form. So we're obviously going to go into executive session and discuss this with our legal representative from the city attorney's office, but there has been an ongoing relationship to try and provide the benefits. The taxpayers are paying for it, but to give everyone a fair shake at it and not disrespect anyone along the process. So I appreciate that we've come to this point to try and make this work for everybody. Some of the people, the gentleman that first spoke from sanitation, talked about the city's a good place to work and why are we having this? We've got some real financial challenges ahead, not only here, but in the state and on the national level. And that's one of the problems, is the dollars that we used to see aren't coming in for a variety of reasons. So we appreciate working with the unions, and I just want to show my support for the coalition and what you've already done to this point to try and work with us and with the city entities to try and bring about peaceful accord. This one issue, when we have a contract, when we have MOUs, and we have the negotiations, we have the process, we sign, we ratify, et cetera, you're currently under an MOU that goes till 2013?
Correct.
And is this, what we're discussing now, part of that MOU, or is this separate from that MOU?
The Joint Labor Management Committee was created over 21 years ago, and that process, the committee process itself, is codified in virtually every civilian MOU. So yes.
So with that,
Yes.
with that, we talk about meet and discuss, meet and confer. When you're in an MOU, there's an obligation by both parties to agree to the MOU, the city and the workers.
Correct.
There's an agreement. The MOU's 2013. The provisions that are being proposed for change, are those currently in the MOU?
The process of the Joint Labor Management Committee is in the MOU. We provided copies to you of the joint rules of the committee so that you can see very clearly the parties came together 21 years ago and negotiated very clear rules about how matters would be decided in the committee.
No, I understand, but the rates that are currently being proposed to modify, the current rates and the proposed modification, are the current rates in the MOU, or is that not part of the MOU?
What's in the MOU is the process by which changes get made. So the city is attempting to circumvent the processes that exist in our MOUs that define a labor management benefits committee. All due respect, many of the changes contemplated were potentially available for the city in discussions we've had over the last year. I think Cheryl's point and our collective point is if we don't continue to provide benefits through the Labor Management Benefits Committee, which we believe this action on the part of the city endangers, then it's have at it. And the beneficiary of that would be the vendors that provide benefits. So Kaiser would be thrilled, Blue Cross would be tickled pink.
They'd mark it up as much as they wanted.
Exactly. It's really our collective work that's maintained the integrity of this benefit provision. What the city is attempting to do is sort of have it both ways, that they would attempt to make changes unilaterally and then also participate in a labor management benefits committee. It's one or the other.
But the rates that we're talking about, the doctor copay, the emergency, et cetera, that is part of the current MOU that goes to 2013, and that is what we're discussing to be modified?
I think there are two MOUs, Councilman. There's the MOU that created the JLMBC. That MOU identifies how changes will be made to plan design.
Right.
In our MOUs that run through 2013, specific MOUs, that process is identified as the process to monitor and administer plan design. In the first MOU that created the JLMBC, was also incorporated the specific, very specific process, and that's what's before you in Attachment 1 on how to make those changes.
Right.
So our MOUs, the 2013 MOUs, very clearly incorporate these provisions. Correct. And we're all signatories to the first MOU that created the JLMBC.
These are all the issues that you talk about, plan design, questions of copays. These are all mandatory subjects of bargaining. And the parties came together 21 years ago and said the best way for us to work together would be to create basically a joint labor management committee. We entered into an MOU that created the committee. We established rules. The rules were quite clear in terms of the consensus decision-making process, and we have followed those rules successfully for 21 years, effectively providing the most cost-effective benefit plan in the city of Los Angeles and actually within Southern California.
And come to an agreement and a conclusion.
Absolutely. And so what's before you really is what we believe to be an extra legal move, a move outside in violation of the Joint Labor Management MOU that was created 21 years ago, the rules that were adopted by that committee, and ultimately our collective bargaining
And is this the
agreement.
first time it's ever happened?
Yes.
Julie?
And the problem that this creates is, our MOUs we would each individually negotiate benefits, so we lose the leverage that we have when we negotiate together with the providers. But the other problem is we would, in our contracts, freeze all benefits. So the contract contemplates that our benefits are set in place when we enter into that contract. The JLMBC was put in place recognizing that benefits and what we pay for benefits changes year to year, and we need that flexibility. And that's why we defer to the JLMBC.
Right.
When the parties agree to a change at the JLMBC, in other words, when both the employees, representatives, and management agree, it's in our collective best interest to modify the plan design, then we do it. Otherwise, it just goes back to what we contemplated for when we negotiated our contracts.
Okay.
And none of us want that rigid structure. We want the flexibility to be able to respond to changes in plan design, to costs year to year. If we blow up this JLMBC, and it would not be in our interest to have the city say, well, we'll negotiate with you and we'll keep the JLMBC in place, but we'll also unilaterally implement. In that case, we're better off negotiating individually.
Okay, it's the matter of fairness as you see it.
Correct.
Julie, did you have something else before we?
Fairness, efficacy, and cost. All due respect, we have figured out together how to provide the most cost-effective benefits that has benefited the city for the long haul. Now that we face a time of absolute crisis, we expected it actually better that we work together more rather than attempting for the city to act unilaterally, again, to save something short of $3 million on a $217 million plan. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make fiscal sense.
Okay.
Let me ask you this, and I really appreciate the dialogue. This is what we need to do more of as we go into this deeper situation, which frankly is only going to get worse over the next 6-8 months. It's not going to get better unless we have leadership out of Washington on health care issues that take it off of our plate. According to the report that we were given here, it says, according to the report, civilian health care benefit costs have more than doubled in the last 10 years. And the next line says, to mitigate these costs in accordance with instructions from the EERC, Council has been instructed to consider the following modifications of the FLEX program. So they specifically put out, they say increase doctor's office visits from $10 to $20 for HMOs, increase the emergency room co-payment from $50 to $100, eliminate the $750 per pay period FLEX credit, adjust the co-payment for prescriptions to 3 tiers, $10 for generic, 20 for brand names, 40 for off-formula prescriptions. And when they add this up in this chart we're given here, it's $13 million. I mean, it's $3 million for the rest of this fiscal year, but it's a 12-month period. And what they're saying basically in this report is this $13 million is an effort, in their conclusion, that the estimated savings of $13 million is to deal with the reality that the costs keep going up. City doesn't have the money. We don't have the money. So what do you recommend in an open forum like this is the best strategy to go in dealing with the incredible health care costs that continue to be out of control because these companies that provide it are ripping us off as regular folks. We know that. How do we deal with it? You did good when you went back to them and you sat with them and you said, hey, stop ripping us off, because they're ripping everybody off. How do we go about doing this so we're not the ones, you and I, but we deal with the real culprit in the room, which is the costs keep going up by these providers?
Well, you state the problem precisely, and we think that we are in a better and stronger position to deal with these providers in a really aggressive way if we're together. We think by blowing up the Joint Labor Management Benefits Committee, what we will end up doing is devolving the committee. Unions that have members in trust plans will try to enroll their members there, et cetera, et cetera. We'll no longer have the bargaining clout that we have right now. Number two, I also want to correct the record. This committee has not been adverse to copays when they make sense. In 2010 plan year, we agreed to increase copays on the prescription drug and emergency room. We've done it before. We were one of the early groups to go to a $10 copay before anyone else did. So this group is not the unions are not philosophically adverse to copays. What we are committed to doing, though, is to making these decisions in a joint labor management way, in a way that maintains our unified power position vis-a-vis the providers, and allows us to deal aggressively. Quite honestly, the savings that we collectively achieved by moving the providers to pull down those, to requote, for Blue Cross to requote from 24% to 9%, for Kaiser to requote from 9% to 6.3%. Those were huge dollars, and we were responsible for that. We also went to the providers, and this was contrary to their methodology, to say, look, we just had an early retirement program, and some of our older workers have retired, and so it's changed the demographics of our group. And even though it wasn't their methodology to requote, we forced them to do it, and both Blue Cross and Kaiser reanalyzed the demographic mix post-ERIP and came in with lower quotes as a result of that. And so we've been working in I think, a very innovative way to try to push the providers as much as we can. And I just said that we've also agreed that we're going out to an RFI to solicit sort of the best ideas from the provider community, so that for the next plan year 12, we can really begin to think creatively about how we drive down costs and look creatively about plan design.
Creatively look at what San Francisco's been doing about health care for its people, and sort of a creative strategy where they took control over it rather than let the damn providers call the shots?
Well, that's our goal. I'm not familiar with the San Francisco situation, but that's what we do in the Joint Labor Management Committee, and that's why we think that this approach is so ill-advised. I mean, essentially, what you're going to do is blow up a process that has been a responsible committee, really keeping a lid on the cost of benefits for city workers, for basically $3 million in savings. Now, I don't want to minimize the $3 million, but I think that we need to keep our eye on the prize, which is the long-term ability to be creative, to drive down costs, to think about how we can best secure in the marketplace the best and most cost-effective care for city workers. And we think that that's our mission. That has been our mission for 21 years. And we want to continue to work with you in that manner, and to not go down this, we think, to be a foolish, penny-wise, pound-foolish effort.
Mr. Parks?
So is the coalition position that this is not legal, or that this is not fair? There's a difference between that, right?
Both.
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 Well, that's true. If it's not legal, it's not fair, right? But if it's just, are you saying it's legal, but it's not fair moving forward?
It's not legal. We're saying we're all signatories to the MOU that created the JLMBC. We're bound by the decisions of the JLMBC. You are too. In that case involving the parking JLMBC, the hearing officer who heard the matter is said to the parties, you all agreed to be bound by you're all signatories to this MOU. This MOU identified how changes would be made, and you're all bound by it. You cannot now, quote, cry foul because you didn't like the results. And said essentially that the city was correct, and the city's position in that case was that all parties were all signatories to the MOU were bound by the decisions of the JLMBC.
And the vote that was taken on this one issue, what happened at that vote?
The vote was defeated.
The vote was defeated. So now your position is the city is now circumventing that vote because the city didn't get what it wanted and now wants to do it unilaterally.
Correct.
Outside of that process.
As opposed to coming back to the committee and attempting to be right. I mean, it's an ongoing committee. This is not,
and there's been
we're not done with it.
There's been other instances where votes have been taken, but the city just kept working to see what else we could come up with, right? This would be the first time that, okay, something happens there, and let's bring it to the full council to do something unilaterally. This is the first time
First
out of
time.
21 years?
But I want to state that in the Personnel Committee, we discussed this issue and said for the union, the coalition, the city to sit down and further discuss it, and then Mr. Parks and I agreed to have this joint meeting today. Hopefully, something would be discussed and resolved, so we'd have some type of positive response. And I'm hearing that no positive response, but was there any discussion with the city on this particular issue of the health care plan?
No.
That's what the direction was at the personnel meeting. That's why we had this joint meeting today, so
And
we
we
could
would
hopefully
like-
get some headway.
We would be eager to talk. I mean, frankly, we understand the moment we're in, and we would expect to work this out together, as opposed to using the energy, fighting each other about for over $2.75 million, and sacrificing the $60 million that would be saved next year and the year after. This is benefits that are provided plan year by plan year, and the repercussions of not figuring this out together are far more deleterious than the time lost in these moments.
So that's what I find frustrating, is that we've waited probably 2 weeks since our last personnel meeting to hopefully come today with this joint meeting between the Personnel Committee and Budget and Finance to have some response that is more positive than what we're hearing, and that is just a couple weeks just washed away. So, okay, that's all I need for now.
Yeah, and I just want to end by this. As I'm listening to this, I think I'm getting what the coalition is saying in terms of there's larger repercussions here, and we're thinking short-term rather than long-term. You know, the financial situation for the city is not going to get any better the next few years, and we got to work together with our union, with our friends in labor, to get something done. And I think this is setting us off on the wrong path with that animosity, rather than trying to sit down and work together on not only these issues, but larger issues that are looming before us, that I think the answer in helping with our financial situation is going to be with labor. So just, I get that, I understand that.
So due to the issue that's before us, the joint committee will be recessing in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 in order to confer with legal counsel regarding impasse number 220 proceeding before the Employee Relations Board.
Hold on, I got a couple of questions, and we got one more speaker. Let me just get, when you say blow up the system, are you referring that you believe that the whole Joint Labor Committee is dissolved because of this disagreement? Or
No,
does
but it might as well be, all due respect.
Okay, I just want to make sure, when you say blow up, this has nothing to do with dissolving. It's your perception that because of this decision, you're believing that it's there's no need to
We
go
either work
further.
together or we, I mean, again, the city can, we believe, not have it both ways. They're party to a labor management process, and either the city wants to work within that process or it doesn't. The doesn't is, in our minds, not working within the Labor Management Benefits Committee. So
So you say,
Call it
it's
what
your
you
belief
want.
that it's dissolved if you don't come to this agreement? If you don't use the
we're
process?
made ineffective.
Okay.
We will, once again, the city will move toward a position of risk versus certainty. We will be in litigation if there is an effort to violate an MOU that has been in place for 21 years. That we can't, we will be obligated to defend our collective bargaining agreements. That is our duty and responsibility, not a choice. So we ask that we not move again from certainty to risk. What is certain is a process where we continue to work together, continue to collaborate. Again, we are not, we clearly grasp the, and obviously when we get into item number 3 today, we are clearly sensitive to the financial challenges that the city is facing. We're working in a variety of fronts to try to be responsive in that way, and we have worked in the joint labor management process. But we really ask that you not, again, move in a direction, take an action which will be at risk, which must be challenged, instead of fostering joint labor management collaboration, which has and can, again, drive down costs.
All right, you're using up all my time on my question. Let me get to my question. The other issue is, what is your perception of, in the sense of the medical plans, what the growth has been over the last 10 years? You've talked about all of the efforts to reduce it, but what is your perception of
Actually, The
net
committee
cost.
asked the consultant to do a 10-year review and then a longer-term review, and the results were pretty astounding, that we truly have, compared to other large employers, not just public employers, but employers of comparable size, we've, per person, managed to keep these benefits, comparable benefits.
Okay, but what I want to get to is what has been the increase to the city, because although we may be comparable, it doesn't validate that we can afford it. Because, you know, it's, what I'm trying to get at, do you know what the increase has been over the last 10 years?
Obviously, the reason that our nation responded with health care reform is that
Do you
this
know
has
for
been
the city?
The city's experience is no worse than, in fact, as Julie said,
Okay.
better than the national experience, better than the experience of large comparable
I
employers.
understand that, but I'm just saying, do you know what the dollar value has increased in the city?
No.
No, okay. Let me just tell you, it's gone up over 100%.
113%.
All right, and so then the other issue is, I'd like to get, is it your view that the ERB, the information that went before the ERB, that for the joint labor, that it's not advisory to the city, but that it is mandatory? Is that your view?
Yeah, it's our position that any changes, whether
No,
up or down,
answer my question. Is it advisory or mandatory? That's all I need to know.
It's a mandatory.
Mandatory.
I
So
would-
did any of you represent this issue before the ERB?
Yes.
Okay. Was there discussion as to the position of it being advisory?
Well, I think we indicated to the ERB that for a change to happen, the committee has to approve it, and the council, if we were to improve benefits, the committee would have to adopt it, and then it would come to the
Was
council.
there any discussion about, in that meeting for ERB, that the position of the unions was that it was the Joint Labor Committee is advisory? Did that ever come up, or was there a position taken by the union?
I think the city tried to argue that that's what we were saying.
But you didn't agree with that argument?
That's
You didn't?
correct. That's correct.
The other thing is that when you comment on the dollar savings at $3 million, where did that number come from?
From the
Because the
state.
number we have is $13 million.
Last line.
Pardon?
The 13 million, every year, there's an opportunity to change plan design. So for this year, for plan year 2011, the CAO report indicates that there will be $3.2 million of savings. That will be offset by $500 million cost in having to go to a new open enrollment period, print up all the materials, and incur the cost of requiring a new open enrollment period. Again, because these benefit determinations are made on an annual basis, all of these matters can be up and are up, of course, for plan year 2012. I've also said that for plan year 2012, we're going to solicit an RFI to look at more creative
So you
approaches.
disagree that the CAO's figures of $13 million for a 12-month period?
But there's not 12 months left.
No, it's continual. We're not saying $13 million for this fiscal year or this calendar year. We're saying for the full year. Do you disagree that for 12 months, there's a $13 million savings?
Correct, but we can revisit this issue
No,
in time for a full
Is
year.
that a yes or no? Do you agree it's $13 million
That's
for
what the
12
CAO
months?
report says,
Okay, no, I said, do you agree with that? Or do you disagree?
that it's an annual, the 13 million is annual, yes.
Okay,
And for
annual.
this fiscal year, excuse me, not for this fiscal year, but for this.
No, because we only have 7 months left. But the issue
Correct.
is that you agree that it's $13 million for 12 months.
I believe so, I don't.
All right.
But it's,
Right.
benefits are done on a plan year that's a calendar year.
Okay, I'm
So
just saying,
I think
but
they're off a
it's
half a
whatever the
year.
12 months, if it's fiscal year or calendar year, on a
I think they're off
12-month
by a half a
period, if
year.
it's a 12-month period.
No, it's 6 million, and this is 3.25 million minus half a million.
So you don't agree that it's
No.
13 million for 12 months?
Well, I don't know what 12 months they're talking about.
Well,
the-
it's
the
either
benefit
12 months
year-
in the fiscal year or 12
No,
months in the
no,
calendar year.
benefits are done on a calendar
No,
year.
I was saying, so you don't agree?
No.
Okay, all right, fine. Let me just ask Alan to come up, and then we're going to go in closed session.
At least I will, yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Allen?
Alan spoke on one, Pesic, Alan, there he is.
Thank you once again, members, council, budget committee. I'm kind of confused, and I have an excuse, I'm blonde. Last time I was up here, I thought I was speaking on what the representatives that were alongside of me were talking on. I guess now we're talking about benefits. We all joined the city workforce for those benefits, for the good of ourselves and our families, our future. There are a lot of ways to bring back money to the city without bleeding us anymore. I'm on furlough along with a lot of my brothers and sisters of the city workforce. We can't afford any more cuts. We need to sit down and rationally discuss this and find a real way to fix this ongoing problem. It's being put on our backs because of an oversight of $640 million plus. We didn't do that, and we're being held accountable. A small group, that's discriminatory. In our agreement, third page, last section under shared sacrifice, first paragraph, last sentence, and I've read this before to you all. The mayor and the council shall ensure that all city employees contribute to the shared sacrifice during this time, and that all city entities participate equitably. You need to hold all city employees and all city entities to that agreement. That's where the coalition's agreement figures came from. That hasn't been done. It needs to be. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to recess into the closed session. The folks can stay here while we recess to closed session. We'll return when we're completed with closed session.
To order. We just completed the closed session. We'd ask the city staff to come up, and Mr. Zion is going to provide some direction as to how this committee will move on this issue.
And do we have coalition representatives in the room? Coalition representatives? All right, you want to come forward, please, so we'll make sure that we have it on the record. Alice, you have your notepad. Perfect. Thank you. The Personnel Committee, Budget and Finance met in closed session to discuss this matter, item number 2, and the direction given is as follows. There will be a meeting with the city representatives, coalition representatives, Joint Labor Management Committee, to discuss this specific item, the item regarding health care coverage, costs, etc., and to report back to this joint committee on January 10th with the results of those discussions. Whether there's multiple meetings or not, that the coalition and the union representatives, the city representatives report back to this joint Budget and Finance Personnel Committee on January 10th. And the direction would be to review, hopefully resolve, and report back to this joint committee on the results, but to specifically discuss the issues regarding the health care programs in total that have been in the process of discussions and no settlement has been made. Any other direction from Personnel Director?
No, sir.
That covers it all. Mr. Parks?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that when you talk about the issue of the health, that we're talking specifically about the civilian modified flexible benefit program, and follow those bargaining instructions given by EERC at a prior meeting.
Yes, sir, that's understood.
And that was, for the record, item number 2, file number 10-1627 on today's agenda. Alice, you have all that?
I have all of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That'll conclude the personnel part of this meeting.
We'll adjourn the joint meeting of the Budget and Finance and Personnel Committees, and then we'll reconvene the Personnel Committee. I'm sorry, the Budget and Finance Committee. I thought you got away.
You get a flower for it. Thank you, Dennis.
My birthday, man. No, tomorrow.
All right, so that should take us to item 3,
Pearl Harbor Day.
which is a CO report relative to the 2010-11 operational plan that details current departmental deficits
Anniversary of my 30th
and
birthday.
proposed solutions to reduce or eliminate the deficits.
Okay. All right, we're going to call up, if we get 4 people up to the podium, we can get these Public comments, Richard Hardane, Louis, is it Schilling, Edgar Rodriguez, Franco Torres. Wait, give your name first.
Good afternoon, Richard Haldane, LAPD, Motor Transport Division.
Speak right into that mic.
Can't hear you.
Sorry.
That's all right.
We're here today because of the CAO's proposal to eliminate 225 jobs, civilian jobs for the police. My understanding is the police are $29 million over budget already, the bulk of which my understanding is due to sworn overtime pay. I don't quite understand how overpaying for overtime all of a sudden comes to civilian jobs on the chopping block. I understand we're in hard financial times. To me, the first things that need to go are perks, not personnel. Let's find ways to get this budget balanced and to pay these people, not ruin people's lives and their livelihood. It just doesn't make sense to have take-home cars when we can't balance a budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Franco Torres. The reason I'm here is just to put a face to those cuts and those furloughs. They're being proposed by the city council or by the city because of the problems that we have financially. My title with the department is with LAPD Motor Transport Division. My title is garage attendant. My title may not be as well known as mayor or chief of police, but my work is just as important. What I do is pretty much I wash cars, I fill vehicles, I put tires, install tires and batteries, but I'm not limited to that. What I do as well is have to do with public safety and officer safety. I'm the person, and many of my others co-workers do is, we're the people that cleans the back seats of those vehicles when they are filled with blood, vomit, urines, and all that nasty stuff. I'm the face behind that work. And when you're saying I'm gonna cut this work, well, you're cutting this person right here in front of you. I live in District 8, we are Mr. Parks District, and one of your constituents. And when you're cutting work, not only it affects me, it affects 4 other people that live in that district, in my house. So I want you to consider that when making those proposals, when you're cutting those budgets.
Let me just clarify, so as the speakers come up so that you're clear. First of all, the CAO's report reflects a recommendation of 225 eliminations of positions. The police department recommended 450, so you're aware of where that recommendation came from. The other issue is that the police department has not identified where the proposed cuts will be made. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that, so that's clear as to what the recommendations and who made them. Okay?
Good afternoon, sir. How you doing? My name is Eugene Rodriguez. I'm also a garage attendant for the City of Los Angeles Police Department. I'm just here to say that, these cuts do affect a lot of us. Oh, sorry. These cuts do affect a lot of us, and we're already below 50% of our staffing. In my position, in my garage itself, supposed to have 5 garage attendants. In my position, we're down to 2 already. So mine and my partner's workload has more than doubled in the last few years. I mean, we've taken furloughs, we've taken pay cuts, or missed our opportunity for raises. I'm not sure exactly, but I've heard rumors that there's other money and stuff that's been uncollected and unpaid debt. I don't know. I'm just asking you to exhaust every resource you can before you start laying people off. I myself have 4 children. I know a lot of my coworkers have children, and the furloughs are hard enough. Layoffs would really just, it wouldn't be nice. And I just like to ask you, please, to exhaust every different opportunity you can. Thank you.
Thank you. And before you get started, let me ask the 3 more speakers to come up. Ronaldo, is it Brigil, Terry Keating, and Natty, is that Meshling? Okay, you can start. Louis?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Lou Schilling. I am a senior equipment mechanic with LAPD Civilian Motor Transport Division. My job is basically a shop supervisor of one of their many garages. As you can see that I am wearing blue, it means that I'm a working supervisor. I'm not sitting behind a desk and just telling others what to do. I'm out there doing what needs to be done also, along with many of the gentlemen behind me. I'm coming here today because I'm concerned with the LAPD's proposition of trying to hire more officers under the present fiscal situation, and doing so by trying to eliminate some of the civilian positions that seem to be very well needed within the LAPD. I know I speak for others that I don't see the correct rationale in having officers manning positions that can be run by clerical people for a lot less money, and thus getting them back to the job into which they're highly trained, which is law enforcement. It just doesn't make sense in the fiscal times we're going at it. I understand that we definitely want to increase our police and that safety is a vital issue to everyone within the city, but like other city departments, the LAPD has to live within their financial means. And obviously, one of the things they could cut for their own benefit, would be some of the overtime, and there's got to be other ways to structure it. But losing 225 civilians this time is going to make it a whole lot easier next time when they're 60 million short, 20 million short. The truth is, as you hire more law enforcement officers, you actually need more support group, not less. So I'm urging you to go ahead and reconsider LAPD's request and force them to go ahead and take the correct management decisions to live within their financial means.
Yeah, can I just ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
If they were to do that, who's going to do your job?
Well, obviously, sir, let's be honest with you, we do have law enforcement officers handling routine clerical and record keeping. I don't particularly think I don't think the officers want other officers working on the cars. Okay, and again, you know, there's obviously a large contingency behind me, and agreeing with Mr. Parks under here, Councilman Parks, I understand. I'm not just saying, look, you know, I'm the same guy, you know, I mean, you're going to hear it all day from everybody who doesn't want to lose their job. Absolutely. Right. I'm asking that too, but I'm asking them to go a step further and say this is a bad decision financially and for long-range fiscal responsibility to lay off needed civilians throughout, not just motor transport. Okay? To go ahead and hire officers when this just clearly isn't the best financial time to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. What's your first name? Ronaldo?
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronaldo Brigel.
Hold on just a minute. Is Terry Keating here? Going once? You okay? What about Nadi Michelin? Nady? Is he's gone? Brian O'Connor? Come on up. Alan Pesic? And this is Artemio Risotto? Okay, we can just have your seat there. Thank you, sir. Artemio? Okay, let's start.
Hi, again, my name is Ronaldo Brigel. I'm an equipment mechanic from Hollenbeck Division. I'd just like to make it short. When we got our department and other departments getting furloughed, not all departments in the city are getting furloughed. I think if we're all going to take a cut to help out this financial crisis, it has to be across the board, not just LAPD, not just general services. I think it has to happen also with the Department of Water and Power, airports, and everybody else. Have the extra resources that they have, try to put into the general fund, help out all the rest of the city. We're a whole city, not just department. It's the Department of Water and Power is an entire different city from the city of Los Angeles. We're all one big city, and each department should help out each other.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hello, my name is Brian O'Connor. I work at Central Facilities Garage as a mechanic. And I just want to say I worked many years on the outside, as they call it, and it's very difficult to get in to work for the city. And I realized once I got in, everybody was very professional and everyone has just such a great work ethic, which I'd never seen ever until I came to the city. So when I started hearing all these crises going on and they're talking about laying off people, getting rid of people. It'd be a shame to get rid of all that, all these great guys who love their jobs and they're so good at it. These are like the best guys I've ever worked with. So it'd be a shame to lose all of that and put an end to all that, because what we do is so unique. Not everybody can do what we do, so only the best can work on the police cars. So it'd be a shame to just end all that. So I'm just very happy to work for the LAPD, and I'm real proud to work there. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Could we have your first two seats and ask Kenneth Moore and Charlie Mims to come up? All right, Alan.
Thank you again, members of the committee. Once again, my name is Alan Peshek. I work for the Department of General Services Supply Division. I order the auto parts for LAPD. The parts these gentlemen use on the police vehicles. I'd like for all of you to take a long look at these faces. This room holds about 120 times 2 is the amount you're not going to see anymore with layoffs if they go through. It's not right. We had an agreement that all city entities would participate equitably, that all city employees would contribute during this shared sacrifice. That's not happening. You all are putting it on a small group's back. None of us caused this. We're here to get through it. We have our families and ourselves to think about. We did the best we could for the city, and we will keep doing it. You say we don't generate money, but we do. We save the city money by not having to contract out. Contractor gets in the door at a small fee, and it keeps going up and up and up. We've seen that before. Are you willing to risk these guys' jobs to try that again? Please don't. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, let's see, you're Keith?
Yes.
Okay, is Charlie Mims still here? Okay. Mike McCosker? Alice Goff? Okay. We can get started here.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. My name is Artemio Risolto, working for Property Division, LAPD. And I'm here, not to be disrespectful, but I want to drive home a point by recalling the words of a Kenny Rogers song, because it's so close to Christmas, and there's this proposal about laying hundreds of civilian employees. The song is, "You've picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille." And all I'm trying to say is, there is that definite purpose for hiring civilians. They are a lot cheaper, and they are faithful workers, faithful, hardworking workers. And so in your infinite wisdom and technical expertise on how to run the city, we trust you to do your very best for us, because we do our very best every single day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keith?
Hi, my name's Keith Moore. I've been a mechanic with the police department for last 29 years. And I've had a, great job, and everything's been fine. And, I know we're in a lot of financial trouble right now. I guess I just never get a true answer to why we're not tapping the other departments for furloughs. I know they're revenue producing, and you don't really want to touch them, but maybe my question is to you guys, why aren't we touching them at all?
We're not allowed to go.
Oh, you can't talk?
We can talk.
You can't answer.
No, but let me just say.
Okay.
This isn't a stand-up routine.
Oh, okay. I've never been to one of these before.
That we're listening to you.
Oh,
That's why
okay.
you're up there. And
I was just hoping.
Let me finish.
Yeah, okay.
City staff will come up, and I'm sure they'll answer all your questions if you sit through that. But we're not here to go back and forth. We're giving you a chance to express yourself.
Okay.
All right? Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
You through?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, let me just ask two more people to come up. Cheryl Parisi and Jim McQuiston. Okay. Your turn.
Councilmember Parks, members of the committee, thanks. My name is Mike McCosker. I'm the business agent for Local 112, the firefighters.
What I have to say, our concerns, actually, our bargaining unit positions are included in item number 3. A little reluctant to break the continuity of people, the brothers and sisters that come up and are speaking on this issue. I'll tell you just quite frankly, their issue and the issue of layoffs is so vastly of greater import than what I'm about to say. I would just ask you to subordinate my comments to theirs. They're facing layoffs. We are not. However, having said that, I also go on to tell you that police department, I can't speak for police officers, but as a retired firefighter, I can tell you that the department isn't a matter of how many badges you can put on the street or how many people you can put out there. It really is. It's an organic whole. It's everybody working together. So there's no. I would imagine there's no real room for reduction in the civilian workforce in the police department. That's just using my fire department experience. I know if we lose 1 or 2 people, you can feel it in the fire department. Now, on to our issue, item number 3 contains some identified recommendations for reductions, staff assistants, EMS captains, and hazmat personnel. And while we're loath to lose any of those, I would just remind you as a special category, the loss of the EMS district captains would put us in a position of actually having great difficulty, if not an impossibility, of passing our tentative agreement on the contract. You know, it's a component to the contract itself. The rest of them, obviously, all the positions speak for themselves in terms of safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Alice?
Good afternoon. Alice Goff. I'm the president of Local 3090. Asked me, we represent the clerical and support services employees in the department. And I just want to say, council member, that the language that I read said that the proposal was to eliminate the positions from within the support staff, and it specifically said clerical, fleet services, and
You're talking about the
one
police
other
department?
place. Yes.
Yeah, but also they said they've not identified the specific positions, they've done categories. So that's,
But
just wanna make sure
overall
people
in
are
that,
clear.
right, but overall in that support staff, that's what we as civilian employees are.
civilians do.
Right, so, you know, along that, it's really like mind-boggling to think that there would be any attempt to further reduce the already decimated civilian workforce in the department. The contradictions, you know, there's the ongoing hiring of police officers, and then you turn around and assign police officers to do the civilian jobs. And so that number, that 9,900 plus that they're always seeking, is really a moving target. And then we furlough civilians and turn around and pay cash overtime to backfill for those positions, or you fill them, you staff them with police officers. We deleted vacant civilian clerical positions, and as a result of the short staff, then in records identification, duties were pushed down to the divisional records sections that are already overwhelmed, causing backlog in processing of the police reports. And now I understand that the FIs, the field investigation cards, are being processed by volunteers. There are just some contradictions that make no sense to me as a department employee who had to do some vigorous, jump through hoops to get onto the department. They continue with the furloughing of PSRs. Now you have a 49% increase in the 911 calls that were abandoned. You have a 90% increase of the non-emergency calls that were abandoned because you don't have staff to answer those calls. It just goes on. And so we just see the current proposal to lay off as just really impossible, and we would ask instead that you not hire the pending police service representative class. There's one in the budget and scheduled to come on in January, that does not occur, and that we really seriously look at not hiring the police officers. Thank you so much.
There must be something in the union manual, there's never a period after any comment?
So we can keep talking.
Just commas and colons, no period, okay. Cheryl?
No period.
Okay, let me just ask 2 people to come up, and we can ask you to give up your seat. Let's see, Julie Butcher, and is it Kim Hunter? Yes. Okay, you come up and sit there, and then, okay.
I want to talk about the police department recommendations and the recommendation to eliminate 225 civilian employees. And I have one word for you, and that's sustainability. I mean, that's the word that we hear around the horseshoe when we're talking about pensions, when we're talking about health care, and we need to talk about the same concept as it relates to public safety. It is a core function of the City of Los Angeles, and it must be planned and managed in a sustainable way. And the core piece of sustainability is civilianization, using the right classification and the right pay scale to do the right work so that you have maximum efficiencies. And the contradiction that we're dealing with here is the contradiction that Alice just laid out so ably and so completely, which is that these backlogs are resulting in a diminution of public safety, when the core function of calling 911 and being able to seek assistance when a crime is being perpetrated, when you are in need of police services and can't get through, and 49% of calls are being are abandoned and not being answered. These are huge challenges, and I would ask again that you do the right thing, that you look at number one, not continuing with the police hiring program for this year, and as Alice said, not move forward with the class of police service representatives that were in the budget to be hired. We think that that's the reasonable place to achieve savings for this year, and long-term, obviously, continue to address the right staffing patterns for the work needed. Thank you.
Let me start with Mr. McQuiston.
Jim McQuiston, you have my statement, but I want to say something else, too. You know, we have a lot of really good people that work for the city, including the people on the horseshoe. But we're grown, as they say, we growed like Topsy. We have a city that's organized for people who haven't gone to high school, who have to work in the city. We have a planning department and a building and safety department that says that people don't know how to build things. We have a city which is still back, you might say, in the Stone Age, because we don't have really up-to-date computer stuff that we can put our fingers on. These are the things we have to work on. And remember, we could have had another big deficit of over $200 million because we didn't have a trash fee. And we worked that out. How many years did it take us to get to there? These are the things we have to think about. This horseshoe has to take the lead. We have to think about how we're doing things and take the reins and go places. We can't just sit around anymore and mess around with little bitty figures, this, that, and the other thing. Now, you know I've given you some other suggestions which also would give us a pot full of money. But we don't want to just continue the way we're going because it's not right. We've got to modernize. We've got to think about, do we really want to tell people the color of their buildings? How does that relate? Do we want to really say, well, if you don't like our laws, come to us and we'll just give you a deviation from the law? That means that no one knows what they can do in this city, and we've got to stop that.
Okay, thank you very much. Last two speakers call up is Marcia Goodman and Peter Refovich.
Good afternoon. I am a 911 operator. I've been working for 25 years, and I just want to say that we are sharing the sacrifice. We're being furloughed, and I just want you to know that we're really playing a dangerous game with that. There was a time when I would sit around, I would be answering the phone, and there would be 10, 15 people next to me. Now you have less than 10 people on any given day at any given time answering 911 calls for over 4 million people in this city. And it's not right. We're playing a dangerous game. Somebody's going to get hurt. I think there are other ways that we can achieve our goals, even the furloughs. There's other ways we can do this. I mean, I sat the other day on 911 with 2 other people for an 8-hour shift on day watch, where you have 15 people furloughed and 15 people on a day off at each center, and then 1 person on the secondary side. So just to let you know that there should be other ways that we can, more creative ways that we can do this. Because when someone wants to call an operator, they shouldn't have to listen to a recording or expect not to get an answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julie?
I don't think I could say anything better than the way that the workers have expressed this. Specifically on police mechanics, the idea of laying off police mechanics is just foolish. We would urge you to listen to the people who do the work. To save $3 million this year by laying off an unspecified number of essential civilians is not only pound-wise, but also pound-foolish. There are many, many other ways of getting to this savings. We stand with the police union in advocating a temporary halt to police hiring. Let's figure out what the magic number really is, both in terms of sworn and civilians. You heard very clearly from the folks doing the work. I think you know the commitment to this department, to this city. Appreciate your time, appreciate your attention. Again, I don't think I could say it any better than the men and women who do the work have expressed it, and urge you to look very deeply at this very foolish proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me call one more time Marcia Goodman. Okay.
Peter Repovich, Los Angeles Police Protective League. Because of attrition, early retirement incentives, and mandatory furloughs of LAPD civilian employees, the number of police officers filling in for essential administrative jobs is increasing, which means less police officers actually doing police work. The problem and the effects are becoming more acute. Currently, the problem equates to 154 officers carrying out the work of civilians. The proposal by the CAO to eliminate 225 additional civilian positions in the LAPD will mean that even more police officers will be pulled from the streets to perform the essential administrative jobs held by civilians. Come February, things will get even worse as the LAPD implements its plan to pull at least 90 officers off the streets to staff the new Metropolitan Detention Center in lieu of hiring civilian jailers. It doesn't make sense to continue to not hire or furlough the critical civilian employees and fill the responsibility with a higher paid police officer who should be out on the streets protecting our communities. It is time to consider temporarily halting the hiring of new officers so that the city can afford to fill vital administrative jobs with civilians, which will allow the LAPD officers to be deployed in their proper law enforcement roles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to call for the last time Terry Keating, Natty Meschling, and Charlie Mims. Okay, that concludes public comment. We can have the city staff come up at this time.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Ben Seha with the City Administrative Officer. With me
And I
is,
think what would be helpful to us if you give us kind of an overview of activities, particularly since the first financial status report. And then I think with the way it's laid out, if we can go by the departments, and if there's not any issues, we can move very quickly. But the ones that are still over or have some deficiencies, those are the ones we'd like to concentrate on.
Certainly.
Those that we asked for, particularly those that we asked for operational plans from the last meeting.
certainly, and with me is Elizabeth Lee, who will be assisting in that process. So to begin with, as the summary indicates, the CAO had been directed by your body and the mayor to work with departments in terms of putting together an operation plan for the city to deal with what had been identified in our first financial status report as a $63.73 million deficit for this current fiscal year. As you may recall, the financial status report identified that deficit as coming from primarily the one-time anticipated early retirement incentive program payouts, elimination or reduction of furlough days for some of our employees, and as well as other salary and expense over budgets that were occurring, over costs that were occurring, in addition to police and fire sworn overtime expenses. And in adopting the recommendations of the first FSR, departments were instructed to develop an operation plan for dealing with their deficits internally. And what we received was plans from those departments that had been identified as having a deficit. Those that did not have a deficit identified in the first financial status report did not submit an operation plan. What you have before you is the operation plan that identifies a deficit that increased by about $24 million. That increase in deficit is attributed primarily to the following: over expenditures in the fire department related to the 7-week suspension of the modified coverage plan. That was from October to mid-November. The required payment of unbudgeted excess sick time for sworn staff in the police department. The estimated increase in reimbursable sworn overtime for police. And the anticipated revenue shortfall for the planning department, as well as some other items that were not counted in the first financial status report. So Table 1 of your report identifies those increases and how the deficit moved from $63.73 million in the first FSR to $87.84 million in this report. So any questions thus far?
And did you cover what that $27 million jump was caused by?
It's a $24.11 million deficit, primarily driven by the fire, an additional deficit in the fire department, and that was related to the suspension of the modified coverage plan. It was also related to additional deficits in the police department. Those pertain primarily to the unbudgeted excess sick time for sworn staff personnel, and also reimbursable police sworn overtime. And then the net of the other departments attributed to the other increase.
Just to remind us, could you just give us an idea on the reimbursable, what does that cover? Because at one time we used to think it was mostly all LAX, but give us some thumbnail of what does reimbursable overtime cover? What kind of activity?
Well, reimbursable does cover a lot of the hours at the Los Angeles airports, as well as grants, I believe.
And also, in addition, the interagency task forces that...
Can't hear you.
I'm Elizabeth Lee of the CAO's office. In addition, it also relates to some interagency task force activities that the police have to participate.
So again, Table 1 of your report on page 2 identifies how that deficit increased from $63.73 million from the first FSR to this current report. So in addition to the additional deficits that were being reported, the operation plans had to identify solutions to those deficits. What we were able to verify is what you have in your report, is those solutions that departments had proposed and that the CAO's office worked with to identify in terms of and verify to some extent the numbers related to attrition, the numbers related to additional revenues that departments are trying to count to offset their deficits.
Let me interrupt you on one thing. Let me just advise for those that are waiting, items 4 and 5 will continue for 1 week because of the lateness of the hour, and so we can get through this item 3.
So going into the proposed operational plan solutions, one of the solutions that has been identified, and this is what we refer to as a global solution, is for those departments that their deficit was being driven by the reduction in furlough days for EAA members. We had identified what that cost would be for the departments, and for those that could not absorb those costs internally, we are proposing to transfer funds from the unappropriated balance to cover those, to make those departments whole for that piece of their deficit. And so what you see where the other deficits are being covered from, you see in Table 2, there is the transfer from the UB for the EAA furlough days that is being proposed. Departments have also identified attrition as being part of their solutions for the remainder of this fiscal year, meaning that as people vacate positions either through retirements or as they transfer out of departments going into perhaps special funded departments, those positions will remain vacant for the remainder of the year. There's a number of targeted curtailments A big portion of this related to the police department and the reason why many of the employees are here. And there's also some identified revenues that are being identified in this operational plan, and for the possibility of either grants coming in or also just revenues that hadn't been budgeted this fiscal year. And there's also increased sources of funds, meaning funds that where general fund dollars can actually be offset from special fund, either through reimbursements or grants coming in. And there's a number of other adjustments and changes that are taking place to get us to part of the solutions. Now, I do want to mention that on the increased sources of funds, we did have to decrease that amount by about $1 million due to a correction that was needed in the city attorney's proposal. So even with those identified solutions, which aggregate, the total number is about 67.2 million, 20 million, that still leaves about a $20 million gap between the newly identified deficit and these proposed solutions. What this report and what our office is recommending is, if the intent is to balance this year's budget, then we will look towards other identified funds in the unappropriated balance in the UB to transfer into these departments to eliminate the remaining deficit. So that would require a transfer of about $20.64 million. We're not recommending that transfer take place now. What we're recommending is we would, throughout the fiscal year, make any necessary transfers in subsequent financial status reports. So that takes us through the summary, and now we're at the actual department-specific recommendations being made.
Let me just, for clarity, we just got a packet of the attachment 1. Are these all new, or is it just one specific one that's been changed, or?
It was only one specific one in the city attorney's packet, item number 15.
Okay, all right, so we'll catch that when we get there. All right.
And just for clarification as well, basically the summary at the back page will be changed, updated based on the city attorney, so we can use the new packet.
So, Ben, if you go through these, like I said, those that have no issues or was not requested to have a operational plan, we can move very quickly and get to those where there's issues that we need to discuss.
Council member, I'm Elizabeth Lee of the CAO's office. I just want to walk you through the first section, the sections of the operational plan. The first section is what we call unfunded liabilities, which are the necessary increases to appropriations in the department, such as the reduction in EAA furlough, ERIP payout, or any deferred sick time, excess sick time payout, or other salary or expense liabilities. As we go through the solutions, we put them in different categories, such as attrition, increased sources of funds, and other changes or adjustment. Would you like to go to the first page of the attachment?
The thing is that if we can just go, any questions, colleagues, on animal services, we can just go by department.
Okay.
Yeah. So for for animal services, the majority of the solutions are coming from reimbursements from the special funds.
All right.
The next department is city attorney on page 2 of the attachment.
Okay. I had a couple of questions. One, on item 10 on your report, what does it refer to when it says current employment levels, as it talks about salary liability?
The department had budget reductions in their salaries general account to the 2010-11 budget, and as of the current time, the employment level would require additional appropriations in its salaries account.
Okay, but I thought when we created the budget that they were given a set amount. Have they reached the TO on their department, or are they still over, as opposed to saying we're responsible to add more funds to the budget? Have they cut to where they should be?
No, they have not.
Okay.
Ida Rubio with the CAO's office. Essentially, the department took a 10% budget cut, for this year so that they would be equal with all other elected officials. The employment level remained the same from last year to this year, other than ERIP or natural attrition.
Okay. The key is how many positions are they over than what's funded in this budget?
How many positions are they overfunded?
Yeah, my understanding is they're in a deficit, and they say that they failed to meet their current employment levels. How many positions are they over?
I'd have to get back to you with that exact number.
It shows overall there's a $5 million deficit in that category.
Right. That number reflects what we tried to do with the CAO recommendations is we were trying to absorb the ERIP payout and the deferred sick leave payout. Essentially, the department cannot absorb those payouts.
I agree. There's no doubt on the sense of the sick leave and the furlough, but I want to get to the very last phrase of the sentence about employment levels. So if we're adding to the liability because we're over the TO, that's what I'm concerned about.
Well, the department does have a recommendation in that they have brought forth that relates to certain revenues that they anticipate to be received to pay for those unfunded liabilities.
Okay, but I think the issue that we found out, those revenues often are not realized, but what is realized is the liability of having positions that are unfunded.
Correct.
So I think when the budget, as we said over and over, and I'll steal Mr. Smith's line, it's not advisory, it's basically the budget. So we really need the CAO to get with the city attorney and pare down that number. We understand all the issues with ERIP, EAA furloughs, deferred sick. We understand that, and there's funds provided. But what we can't overcome is a TO that's over what we budgeted.
And just, part of the solution that the city attorney has proposed is attrition. So they do expect a number of positions to attrit out this fiscal year. That would help them.
But my concern is that as we pass the middle of this year, you know that in January to June, it's very difficult to turn around a year-round problem. And if the attrition doesn't occur, if the revenue doesn't come in, we're still sitting around April or May trying to figure out why we left positions on the budget that weren't funded. So we need to get that resolved. And if money comes in from other means, such as their funds that they expected and things you can adjust upward, but we have a very difficult time adjusting downward. So if we ask the CAO to get with them in the sense, particularly on the area of the employment level, that we must bring that into line. Okay. The other question I had is, and I want to make sure that I understand it. Last year we had a discussion about this Consumer Protection Trust Fund, and I thought that those funds were reverted to the general fund as a reimbursement for funding the unit. Is there something different that we're now moving 4-point-something million into their salary account? Or is this, because I thought in the past we looked at it as a reimbursement.
Those funds have typically, the way the city attorney has been accounting for those funds is they've been received in an off-budget account. And what we did last year was, what we did in the year end was that we appropriated the money to their salary accounts for expenditures that were related to enforcement costs.
It's for enforcement of
Consumer protection? Yes.
Okay, now, is that basically the city funds it up front and then they're allowed to move the money around?
The city's funding those positions through the general fund, and then when a settlement comes in, the money has been deposited in the off-budget account, and then the city attorney has been, with council's permission, appropriating that money to their salary account to reimburse the general fund for those expenditures.
Right. I think we asked the CAO to look at that because I thought we went through this long discussion last time that settlements cannot be used to balance budgets.
Yes. Actually, a few months ago, this committee had requested a report back, a comprehensive report on the accounting and how these revenues have been received into the city. And you asked for a joint report from our office and the controller's office. And so we are working on that report right now, and we will present that to you. Along with that, the city attorney will be releasing their own legal opinion on the legal use of these funds, along with other practical uses of these funds that could possibly benefit the city as a whole, other than just their department.
Okay. And you said report back is on that 17,200 cases?
It's going to be a comprehensive report which includes 17,200 litigation along with other settlements.
I just like the CAO so we can have something consistent, that we make sure that we've talked about it at length. What do we do with settlements, that we're opposed to having offline accounts?
Right.
That money should go into the general fund?
Yeah, we would hope that this report establishes some kind of a fiscal policy so that we can be consistent with the way we've been reporting and appropriating this money.
Okay, very good. Great.
I just wonder if the city attorney had a backup plan for if these targets aren't reached that you're proposing here. And I think some of them are very iffy at best, so.
I'd have to ask the department what their backup plan is.
You want to?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. William Carter, Chief Deputy, City Attorney's Office. As you've seen from the operational plans, we have furloughed all of our employees for 10% of their salary, with some limitations to those that are revenue generators. To date, since July 1st, we are ahead of schedule of collecting our collections. We are ahead of schedule of collecting subrogation. That means insurance proceeds. We have been asking repeatedly to pursue the ACE program. We think the ACE program is a terrific program. I know the CAO and others are working on that report. Our other plans include additional offsets that we might be able to accomplish through workers' compensation. We have a plan to consolidate. We've had a number of plans. Unfortunately, a number of these have not gotten through the system yet. Our primary plan right now is furloughs, attrition, and these funds that we generate through our enforcement protocols, which are allowed under state statute, Business and Professions Code. And I think we are on track to meet our target. That's our plan. And
I hope
we
you're
have
right.
more than one. We have more than one backup plan.
Yeah, okay, and I hope you're right. I don't think, and I've heard a couple of people say today, we're counting on attrition to save our bacon. People aren't leaving voluntarily. I mean, nobody in this economy is leaving the job unless they're 75 years old and they're just tired. You ripped out everybody that was going to leave. So I don't like the word attrition as an option. I don't think it's realistic. And you keep talking about ACE, and you talked about some other programs. And I talked to the city attorney August 20-something or other, and we're going to bring me some of these plans forward, and I still haven't seen them yet. So I'm concerned that, you keep talking about these things, but I don't see any fruition to this discussion.
I think this is going to have to come through the CLA and the mayor's office, and we provided this information to them over a year ago. And I think these are city departments that the mayor's office is going to have to coordinate, and we have not seen any movement on that part.
I'll talk to them, but when I talked to your boss in August, he was going to send me some ideas on how to do some of this and make it work, and I haven't seen it yet. So you're saying you gave it to the CLA, not to me, when I requested it?
We can provide that.
Yeah, I'd like to see it, because, I think there's some good opportunities here, and if you can save the kind of money you're talking about saving, I think we'd want to do that, but not if I don't have a plan in front of me, so.
Thank you. There's a report that the CAO's office is working on the settlement issue with the city attorney's office, and you're going to provide input on that. I assume there might be some instances where there's particular funds that the money goes back in to continue the work the city attorney's office is doing, correct? And that input will be given in the report as well.
We have made our information available to the CAO. The monies that we receive pursuant to consumer and environmental toxic torts, other types of notification, are under state statute. The state law provides where that money should go. And the money goes back to the city attorney's office or the prosecution office that pursued the action. And that money is to be used for the exclusive use of the city attorney's office for that. Whether it's reimbursed or up front, our hope is to have as much of this money up front rather than reimbursed,
to continue doing the work.
Yes.
Do you see any other potential revenue streams from your enforcement mechanisms that you've been more vigorous with than past times in past administrations?
Oh, yes.
Do you see anything down the horizon? Would you share some of those thoughts with us where we can see a revenue stream coming in from your functions?
We have a number of attorneys working full-time on consumer and environmental cases. Those include billboard cases, which are an expanded area of focus. We also have a number of healthcare cases that we're working on, much larger cases than had been worked on in the past.
You remember when we had the billboard people here and they've gone digital, and I asked them for a revenue stream. They never came back with a revenue stream, and we looked at opportunities that the billboard companies should be paying their fair share rather than just placement of a billboard. Do you have any sense of where that's at? That's a good piece of change we could take in.
We proposed a tax,
Right.
revenue on that. That did not go anywhere, apparently. There are other ways that in our negotiations with the billboard companies, we
Why didn't it go anywhere, by the way, from your,
There was a-
I would tax
It was
them
a charter.
in a heartbeat. Huh?
The charter ballot.
I
There was
see.
a provision to tax billboard companies. We believe that was a good idea. Apparently, others did not. We believe that there could be contracts, agreements that could be entered into with the billboard companies in the resolution of certain actions where we could obtain a revenue stream.
On that point, which doesn't have to go as a ballot measure, could you bring that back as a proposal so we
Yes.
can look at the potential revenues of that? I mean, anything that you can do to generate revenues today is more than gold in the gutter. It's really something on the plate that we really need.
We've also increased our collection activities. That money does not come back to the city attorney's office.
Yeah,
That goes
I know.
to the general fund.
Well, that's the part that has me excited. I don't want to lay off any of the guys in the garage, period, and I'd rather have enough revenue coming in from some of the contract negotiations with the billboard companies. As an example, anything we can do to generate revenues from the billboard companies, I'm for.
We agree with that.
Let me just comment, I think we had this discussion before, but in dealing with your budget, we really need you to concentrate on the employment levels. The other issue is, and we talked about this during the last budget, all of those revenue sources that you're discussing, the key is, I don't believe, unless the council agrees with you, that there are going to be resources that you can keep in your budget. I think the other issue we explained last year was that on consumer protection and different kinds of investigations, the council approves your budget beforehand so that you can have those units to go out and pursue those cases. When you get back settlements, the expectation is that's a reimbursement to the city. And so, again, I don't think we can keep trying to fix the budget on funds that either don't come in or funds that really belong to the general fund. And so we had that long discussion in council last time about whether 2-point-something million was going to stay in your budget. I just want to reemphasize that we really need you to concentrate on the employment levels, and if you're over TO, we need to have them cut. But on the other hand, we shouldn't be trying to fix budget gaps with funds that are really general fund dollars.
I understand that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
The next department, the city clerk, will be using the global solution to mitigate their deficit for the change in the EA furlough days. The same with controller. It's going to be a transfer from the UB. The next department is cultural affairs. Their deficit will be mainly taken care of by the transfer from the UB for EA furlough days, and also appropriate reimbursements from various bond-funded programs, such as Proposition F, Proposition Q,
Let me just
and...
stop you one
yeah.
thing. I forgot to mention, on the city attorneys, could we ask this CAO to look at where that ordinance is about the ACE program? So that we can find out where that, because it states in here that it's prepared and it's pending CAO review. So we'd like to find that. Okay, I'm sorry.
I was in cultural affairs. Part of the deficit will be mitigated by appropriating reimbursements from various bond fund programs such as Proposition F, Proposition Q, and Proposition DD for public arts projects to partially offset their deficit. The next department is El Pueblo. They have unfunded liabilities of approximately $50,000. The next department is Emergency Management. Again, it will be, their deficit will be addressed through a transfer from the UB for the EA furlough days. They are also expecting increased source of funding from the Mayor's Office of Homeland Security and Public Safety for positions dedicated to various grant programs. In addition, there will be a one-time transfer from prior year savings from the Emergency Operations Fund. And lastly, there will be a position that's currently general funded will be transferred to work funded by the SCM or the Sewer Construction Management Fund. The next department is Ethics. Their unfunded liabilities is mainly due to the EA furlough days change and also vacation payout and other salary costs. This will be addressed by a reduction in their special prosecutor line item that's budgeted in their contractual services account. For finance, their deficit of almost $1 million will be taken care of by a transfer from the UB for the EA furlough days reduction.
Let me ask you, we asked the Office of Finance and the CAO to bring us, before we start the 11-12 budget, some analysis of trying to figure out how do we take them offline to where they're given a budget to manage during the fiscal year as opposed to being encumbered by managed hiring and price. Do we have an idea when that may be forthcoming?
They've prepared a draft report, Councilman, and that'll be coming to committee. Yeah, the CLA still has to go over it.
Is it coming before we go on break, or is it next year? Or?
It would probably be next year. What our understanding was is you want a proposal to incorporate into the budget discussion. So Finance has prepared something, and we're looking at it now.
But we'll get it before we start the budget review.
We can do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay.
The next department is Fire Department. They have identified a salary liability of $19.2 million, primarily due to the delayed staffing redeployment and temporary cancellation of the modified coverage plan. In addition, they have identified expense liability shortfall in the field equipment expense, rescue supplies and contractual services account of $1.6 million. Targeted solutions have been proposed to reduce their constant staffing overtime account. The department expects to reduce their constant staffing overtime account by redeploying staff assistants, emergency medical service, fire captains, and hazardous materials squad personnel within the field to backfill vacancies. That would equate to approximately $7.5 million. And a reduction in variable staffing overtime is expected to reduce their deficit by $2.5 million by reduction in hours used to support training activities.
Yeah. Could you give us an idea of how much this $10 million deficit is based on the failure to initiate the budget July 1st and then the moving away from the modified staffing? How much of that $10 million?
I think the entire amount is caused by the failure to adopt the budget. I mean, to implement the budget that was adopted and the modified coverage suspension. Yes.
Okay. Do we have somebody here from the mayor's office?
George. He also happens to know about the fire department.
Yeah, and we certainly want the fire department up here,
Yeah.
their opinions.
If you're representing the mayor's office, please bring up a chair for the fire department, because we certainly want to hear.
As long as you're wearing the new hat, you're going to get a haircut.
No, what I'm concerned about, we found out late in the game that fire department was directed not to implement their budget July 1st, and then we had about a 7-week period of modified staffing going away, which is like $100,000 a day. So I'm just wondering, because those decisions were made out of the mayor's office, is there a plan to resolve the $10 million deficit?
Councilmember, Georgia Matera from the mayor's office, so I have to get used to saying that now. Right now, I think our plan is to truly work with, hand in hand with the fire department. I know that the fire department is looking at trying to revise their operational plan to actually redeploy resources, and they're using their software to do that, and I know Chief Cummings is the one who's responsible for that. So as we sit down, we have not had, or I personally have not had the opportunity to sit with the fire department and figure out how we're going to mitigate the rest of this budget problem. I do know that there's some flexibility in the resources, and that will be up to the fire department to decide how they want to staff them appropriately to see if you can enhance the modified coverage plan and save the money potentially at the end of the year. But that's all I have for right now.
All right. That's comments from the fire department.
Battalion Chief Brian Cummings. Council members, the fire chief sent a operational plan letter to Mayor Villaraigosa on November 5th. I have copies of it for the committee. And in that letter, we outlined that we intended to utilize the modified coverage plan in order to continue realizing the budgetary savings necessary while we looked at our deployment model. We continue to we've developed the deployment models, and we are putting them into the software now, which came online the 30th of November. We anticipate it's going to take 30 to 60 days to do a very deliberate and thoughtful look at those deployment models to make sure we aren't, through unintended consequences, having a negative impact on public safety, on response times, and on service delivery. In that interim, in that 30 to 60 days, we will continue modified coverage with an expansion of the modified coverage so that we can start working at that deficit that we have and realizing the savings that are necessary. We want to continue for that 30 to 60 days to ensure that we have a deployment model that's going to have the least negative impact on public safety, so that we have an opportunity to meet with labor and discuss that deployment model with them and try to come to some consensus as we bring it forward to the council.
Let me just ask timing, with almost a half a year gone and a $10 million deficit, any idea of when some of this may come about? Because as we get past January, and if our revenues do not hold as we, have seen in the last year or so, these deficits starts growing, and you only have 6 months to solve it. So we have a timeline?
Yes, sir. We're looking at, with the expansion of the modified coverage, we have the January 2nd as the date for that, giving us time to notify the companies. We also looking at the proposals by the CAO. The department does not support the elimination of the staff assistants for operational reasons. Redeploying the EMS captains and the hazardous materials squad in the harbor, we can move forward with those again with that January start date. And between those two, to again start working away at that deficit as we continue to work on our deployment model.
When you say enhanced modified staffing,
it's the expansion of the modified coverage, adding additional resources to the modified coverage.
Okay. Now, one thing, in looking at your sheet here, they already, the CAO's report reflects that part of the $7.5 million curtailments includes the staff assistance.
Correct.
Or if you have an intention of selling a program where they remain, then that's even more than the $10 million deficit that's in the department.
Correct.
Okay, so you're going to have something to us early January? Is that what our expectation?
Yes, sir. Actually, before then, we need at least 2 weeks out in order to do the deployment in the field. So we'll have it by the end of December with what we are going to go with the expansion of companies into modified coverage. And then we'll have that deployment model. Again, in about 30 days, we'll have solidified some things, and we'll start meeting with labor and moving forward to have it in 60 days.
I just, I want to say to the mayor's office, all the pain that the fire department's experiencing right now is the fault of the mayor's office. And I want to be very clear. We had a plan for this department. It was never done. The mayor signed it. It was never followed. I think and I told Chief Peaks this, and I've enjoyed working with him and Chief Cummings and all the rest. The Adam plan, great idea for the future. It's not going to help us today. Redeployment efforts you're going to come forward with are not going to solve the problem. And the problem was created by the mayor's actions. And I think it's unfair that the fire department and the chief are going through this exercise trying to find solutions to problems they cannot solve this year. You will never find that money. And the mayor, you need to come up with some solutions because you caused the problem. As public safety chair, I find it unconscionable that we approved a budget that this department was not allowed to live with, that he overrode the council's budget on a number of fronts, and then thinking that he was going to solve some of the problems with the unions, reinstated full deployment, getting rid of the MCP, when in fact all that did is put us deeper in the hole. We never effectuated a nickel from the unions in that deal, and put us in a bad hole. And I think it's unfair that Chief Cummings and his department and Chief Peaks have to go through this exercise because of the mayor's failure.
If I could just take that a step further, when the mayor unilaterally got rid of the modified program, many of us were very upset about it. How long had it been suspended, Chief, and how much money did that drain from what we had as an agreed-upon budget?
It was approximately 7 weeks, and I believe it was a little over $7 million.
Correct.
Yeah, about $108,000 a day, so I believe a little bit over $7 million.
And then after that 7-week period, you were able to put it back in place.
Yes, sir.
Well, how did you do that then when he had done it before? What was his time frame, if you can, or the mayor's rep can explain this? Why did he do it for 7 weeks, and then why did he change it after those 7 weeks? I mean, in those 7 weeks, by the way, we started to have rain in different places. I know, because I think about my hills all the time, and had an agreement with the chief that if we had a red flag day, you would instantly have full support there. So I was very happy with the modified program because it did save money and we were being effective. So what made him do it in the beginning, and what made him stop 7 weeks later? Do you know? Because I know the chief doesn't know. We're all baffled here.
I was wearing a different hat then, so I was sitting next to Chief Cummings on the fire department side. So unfortunately, I wish I had the answer for you on that one, but since I've only been wearing this hat for a week, I don't quite have that. And so if you'd like me to come back to you with that, I'd be happy to.
I'd like a report back in it, because that is money that many of us here felt that it was inappropriate for him to do it. Mr. Smith was pretty articulate on that, and you're good now. From the standpoint of the modified program.
Absolutely. We're in the modified deployment right now.
Right.
So we've stopped that $108,000 a day deficit, but we still do have to work on the deficit that was created.
Now, what about your implementing the full budget? Have you?
And again, the EMS captains and the squad were in the proposed budget, and those would be January 2nd as well, with the enhancements to the modified coverage.
Then when this comes to council, maybe we can get some of those answers from the mayor's office as to if there's other ideas, because when we were here before talking about these positions, what we were told is the view was that 80% of the department's workload was paramedics, so therefore there was a need to keep those fire EMS captains now, not much has happened since then, other than that it rained a few times in the middle of modified staffing, and so we're trying to figure out what changed to now the captains can go away and modified staffing can be enhanced, because no one has seen any material change, at least from the activities of the department. But we really need to see how we can effectuate over $10 million worth of deficit over the next 7 months. So we can deal with that. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We'll move on to that item.
The next department is General Services Department. Their unfunded liabilities consist of the EA change in the EA furlough days of $700,000, ERIP payout liability of almost $4 million, deferred excess sick leave payout liability of almost $700,000, and other salary liabilities due to some furlough exemptions of some employees, their unfunded fleet positions, to support the Bureau of Street Services resurfacing program, current excess leave payout and various MOU agreements for reimbursement of various expenses. And in addition, there's expense liability in their fleet program of $2.4 million. Their global solution would consist of the transfer from the UB for the change in EA furlough days. That would take care of the first liability there. They have various targeted curtailments, which comprise of deletion of vacant positions, reduction of fleet parts account of $1.6 million. That would be consistent with the budget 2010-11 approved budget for the reduction of the fleet vehicles of 2,000. There will be a transfer from the source revolving fund of $600,000. In addition, there's a funding source change for the department based on the street damage restoration fee special fund. That will provide the department with resources of almost $6 million to support the street resurfacing program. And currently, they only have resources for fleet services to support 110 miles, and that would change that to assist the Bureau to reach their resurfacing goal to 219 miles. Lastly, there would be a proposed solution to reduce their expense and other special accounts for savings of $1.6 million.
Let me just say, of all the departments, this is one that concerns me the most, is whether we're going to meet that target. And one of the things that I just want to make sure the CAO is looking at on the issue, much as we just talked to the fire department, whether they've implemented their budget in the sense of their table of organization versus the salary that's allocated. The other one that we know that's still pending is it's commented on, let's see, on number 57. We've been waiting for those 2,000 vehicles to be eliminated now for at least 2 fiscal years. And if they're going to do them in the last quarter of this fiscal year, I don't know how much money they're going to achieve by getting that done so late in the fiscal year. Yeah, so that's a big issue, you know, and this is, we were looking for those savings now for a couple of years. The other thing that concerns me is that we still have pending, and it's not mentioned in this report, is that whole retrofit of city buildings. And we started off with a $14 million grant, then we're going to leverage it to a $35 million grant, and we're into December, and nobody knows how you're going to pay for that grant. And now, I guess at the last AURA meeting, they even talked about spending some of the $14 million. So those are things, and then we have some people that are on some training program to learn about retrofit. So what do we do with them if we don't leverage the money to get the grant? These are all things that are hovering that could concern me, whether we're going to really actually hit this double zeros on general services. So you may want to comment on that.
Well, I'm Val Meloff with the Department of General Services. Good evening. I just wanted to comment on the reduction of the fleet's parts account plan that we have in place. Basically, if you recall from the budget, we said that our plan was to eliminate underutilized vehicles. We've brought a consultant on board who is helping us to identify those vehicles. We currently have a survey underway. We're going to start meeting with the departments next week to discuss that process. We're going to report back to the council in March on where we are with that, with the consultant's full plan for eliminating the underutilized vehicles. Once you all have approved that, our plan is to start taking them out of service at least in April, if not sooner. And that will generate $1.6 million in savings for the parts account.
Now, I guess 2 years ago in the budget, we asked that those vehicles be removed.
Right.
And we have progressed to a consultant in maybe March, April next year.
Well, what happened 2 years ago is that we had a fleet reduction plan, which we successfully implemented. This is the next version of it, if you will.
Okay. And then and we're basically looking at the fact that the savings will be in the parts account.
Correct.
As opposed to, are we going to reduce, do we see any reduction in gasoline? Do we see reduction in employees? What else do we get a
The
reduction?
budget already anticipated a reduction in fuel.
Okay.
And right now, our fuel account we're about $1.5 million. We're anticipating a deficit of about $1.5 million. To date, we're expecting that we're going to have to use the funds that were set aside in the UB to offset that.
You say you reduced it $1.5 million, or it's over $1.5 million?
It's over $1.5 million.
Projected for year end or now?
Yeah, for year end, through year end.
That may have something to do with those 2,000 vehicles that didn't disappear. Yeah.
It might have more to do with the fact that fuel prices have increased.
Yeah.
And that's just a snapshot for now. We can't really tell. You know, fuel is so unpredictable.
So fuel has gone up a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can somebody explain to me 59, what that really does? That we, in a sense, that we're getting $5.6 million for funding for street surfacing?
Yes, it's actually it's a solution that was developed collaboratively between the GSD and the Bureau of Street Services. As it stands now, the Bureau of Street Services was budgeted to complete 235 miles of street resurfacing, a target that they were not going to be able to achieve because GSD was not provided the support they needed to, in turn, support the Bureau. So what, in conversations that GSD had with the Bureau identified some funds that they could then transfer to GSD to achieve a level that would be a lot more than what the realistic target would have been. The realistic target would have been 110 miles. With this transfer, they'll be able to complete 219 miles, which is very close to the 235 miles budgeted.
So what was it? Street Services had the dollars to do the work, but didn't have the people?
Exactly, and they didn't have the support from GSD to do the work.
Okay. The issue is we can keep an eye on that, because one thing we just want to make sure we don't get towards the end of this year, a fiscal year, and find out that we have a couple of oops. And the one thing that I'll keep bringing it up until somebody resolves it is that retrofit, because we have yet to figure out how we're going to pay for that bonding, yet we keep going down the road of looking to analyze the buildings and accept the grant, but nobody knows how we're going to pay for it.
Yes, and I understand that the CAO will be reporting back on that issue.
And so we should expect a report back, to this committee on the vehicle issue?
Yes.
In March?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
The next department is ITA. Their unfunded liabilities consists of, again, the change in EAA furlough days of $1.1 million. Their ERA payout liability, deferred excess sick leave, and other salary liabilities contribute to their deficit at this time. There will be a transfer from UB
for the change in EA furlough days of 1.1 million. In addition, there will be, the department has identified increased source of funds based on unexpected potential audit receipts from TDA, which is the special fund for their
Could you-
franchise
that
fee
item, Could you
payments.
explain to us, if that first of all, if it comes forward, do they get to keep it all, or is it under that 60/40 split?
Yeah, this is within the 60/40 split. It's, I think the identified amount that ITA put forward is potentially at 1.5 million. And, but again, we do note that should the audit results not produce this amount, the department would have to eliminate the remaining salary deficit through attrition or through some other form.
So, I mean, is this a 50/50 proposition, or do we feel certain that this amount of money will come through on that audit?
Well, I think according to the department, and this is what they stated in their proposal, was that they felt that they would either get this funding through this audit finding, or through I think a bond that the company
I would just
has
ask
put
that
up.
we work with them and have a plan too, in case this doesn't come forward, because it's very visible as part of their reduction. The other issue is that we asked the CAO and ITA to come forward with a public access budget before we get started on the budget process. Do we know what the status of that is?
I do not.
Jacob Wexler of
Department's here.
Office is here, and ITA.
Jake Wexler with the Office of the City Administrative Officer. IT has been taking the lead on preparing a public access budget. We've been working with them, we've been having the meetings, and there's progress that's being made, and I think a report is
Do
anticipated.
you have a
in the next few
timeline?
weeks.
We hope to have the report before you, so it could be heard at the December 13th meeting for Budget and Finance.
Very good.
Okay, and in that, you're going to take those suggestions we had talked about before of how we save public access, how we take a piece of that revenue that comes from the cable customer and putting it into the system, right?
Yes, we actually have representatives that we're meeting with from Councilman Parks' office, your office, the CLA's office, CAO's office, and Councilman Cardenas' office, working with us on the plan.
And you're also looking at public access, some of the stuff that's in city clerk's office that the public uses in order to stay in touch with the city?
Yes, we're looking at including web services that support public access.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The next department is the Neighborhood Empowerment Department. Their deficit will be covered by a transfer from the UB for the change in EAA furlough days, and also a suspension of managed hiring approval to hire 2 positions to generate the salary savings.
Okay. Now, one thing, can you give us a status? Because what we heard last is that they were going to stay within this budget, but there'd be a plan before next year's budget to give an idea of how they're going to operate, and whether we're going to be moving back to the mayor's plan was to eliminate them, and then we then revive them. So do we have any idea where that is?
Terry Sauer, CAO staff. Mr. Chairman, we've been working with Council District 2. They've conducted a series of town hall meetings with the neighborhood councils. Those results are now out. We're in discussions with the council office. We do not expect that whatever's included or prepared for next year's budget will require additional resources. It's a reconfiguration of the resources. We expect that that's probably going to proceed, or at least based on the last conversation I had with Council District 2, parallel to the budget process, but the hope is that the restructuring is not going to add additional staffing or additional dollars.
Okay, so for 11-12 fiscal year, what we're looking at would be the 23 positions, or?
Yeah, current level, we're not, at least based on the conversation I had last week, there's no intention to come back and suddenly double the budget and double your fund with requests for additional funds.
Okay. Now, is this appear to be where we are, or at one time there was discussion, does it move back closer to what the original proposal was in last year's budget, or this year's budget? Or is this where we're headed? Is it stay pretty well at 23?
I believe, at least as far as I know, we're looking at staying around 23. It's not going, I don't think it's going to either go back to CDD. I think the intent is to work with it as a standalone department, but reconfigure sort of the way the neighborhood councils are administered. It's still, again, in the discussion phases because their report on the town hall meetings just came out, so then sort of this is the phase 2, so it's not complete, it's not quite ready for prime time, and in terms of the specifics about how that's going to be laid out.
And you're saying that it will not be ready for this year's budget?
It will probably
Go parallel?
go parallel, but sometime between now and the time the budget deliberations are completed, but we'll continue to keep your staff apprised and work with your staff so that no one's surprised by what's going on.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay.
The next department is Planning Department. Their deficit is, again, the change in EA furlough days of 1 million. The department also identified anticipated revenue shortfall in the planning case processing special fund based on the current trends. Based on the achieved vacancies, the department is holding positions vacant to offset their deficit. And also, they are also counting on approval of an ordinance that has not yet been adopted by council. And if this ordinance is adopted in the third quarter of the year, there may be $310,000 that may be generated by this special fund.
The only question I have is, we get the CAO to work with the city attorney to get that ordinance. If we get it in the third quarter of the fiscal year, we've lost 6 months of revenue.
Good evening, council members. Madeline Rackley with the CAO. We have good news for you. That ordinance was signed and released today.
Today?
So it will be coming to council as soon as possible.
So when you say signed?
It was released by the city attorney.
All right. So what, do we know what committee, Plum?
I believe it goes to council.
Correct. Yeah.
Direct to council?
Sorry.
Very good. All right, if we could ask the CLA to facilitate that, to get it before council as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you.
Any other questions of planning? No. Okay.
The next department is Police Department.
All right, now we'll all get together. Come on, let's go.
The department has identified several deficits, 4 million from the change in EA furlough days, 4 million from ERIP payout liability, 300,000 from excess sick leave payout. There's also 3 million identified for various expenses. In addition, the MOU with the Police Protective League includes payment of 5 million in excess sick time in January 2011. This amount was not provided in the budget.
Do we know how that oversight occurred? Do we know how that oversight occurred, that we did not put that in the budget?
Don't have a good answer for you on that one.
No smiles.
Was it a budget balancing? Okay.
There's overtime, reimbursable overtime of 9.7 million. The budget provided 4.3 million, and the department anticipates expenditure of approximately 14 million. This leaves about 9.7 million that is unfunded. However, I want to stress that 3 million of this would be reimbursable overtime. It was an inadvertent omission not to cross-reference this 3 million in this write-up to item number 87, which is the sworn overtime reimbursement. So we just wanted to make sure we track all the transfers and appropriations required, and it was discussed in the first FSR that the police had this reimbursement coming in from, either LAWA or other grants and et cetera. But we just want to make sure that we track all of the transfers and appropriations required, and we didn't want to leave out anything.
Is our expectation that...
But it's just a wash.
With the rest of the reimbursable will come to us before June 2011?
That's what the department expects.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So there will be a global solution of transferring money from the UB for the EA furlough days change. And item number 86 would be a reduction of support functions. The department has, as mentioned here before, provided a proposed solution of reducing their civilian employees. Included in this operational plan is a solution of reducing the civilian employment by 225 employees for a savings of $3 million. The department has not identified in which units they would be, so there's no clear service level impact as of now, but we expect the department to provide that in the near future.
I'm going to ask the easy question before we get to the hard ones. Is that the issue, my one question before we get to the civilian cuts, where is our recommendation on in-car video to move the money knowing that we're going to go to phase 2 late next year? Why would we move it, use it, and then have to find it?
We would move it to cover their shortfall in the current fiscal year because we're not going to utilize the funds in the current fiscal year. That would be the only reason we would move the funds.
Okay, but the issue is we made a commitment to institute in-car video phase 2. And what I've seen in the past is that we move that money, then next year we're grappling with how do you get phase 2 done, and then we're putting things together with paper clips. And I'm just wondering, why would we move it knowing it's going to happen July 1st of next year or during that fiscal year?
Just note, it's not the full amount that was set aside. It's, I think, the full amount was 2.5 million. We're proposing, or the proposal is to use 1.5, so it would still leave about $1 million for any tasks related to the implementation of the in-car video that would happen this fiscal year. I do understand your larger question, and it's simply, the answer is, it's a budget balancing measure. In order for us to get through this fiscal year, we need to use whatever resources we have available to end the year balanced.
But if we get to July 1st of next year, and this is moving forward, how much will $1 million pay for?
I'm not sure.
The idea would be to allow us to address finding the additional $1.5 million in the context of next year's budgets. So if we know that we're going to utilize the funds in next year, we would have to identify something to pay for it next year. So we have to come up with a cut that we didn't do this year. We'd identify it in the context of next year.
Because I'm just wondering what's easier.
For our purposes, it would be easier to utilize the funds to cover the deficit this year.
And then scramble next year. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to talk about civilian cuts.
Yes, in the proposed, in the letter submitted by the department, they identified 449 civilian positions that they would have to eliminate to generate the $6 million necessary to close their budget gap. Of course, this was based on elimination of positions coming late in the fiscal year and the savings being generated almost in the last quarter of the fiscal year. So the full year savings from these positions would be significantly more than the $3 million. In putting together this operation plan, knowing that the severe shortages in civilian positions have already occurred in the department, we put forward a number that was half of what was proposed, but still understand the severity of the impacts that would cause the department.
And how many vacancies currently exist before you made this recommendation?
I think the department is probably better suited to answer that question.
Okay, camera's on.
You got some splaining to do, Lucy.
That's it. Been waiting for all day.
I believe the Jerry Chaliff, Los Angeles Police Department, I believe the vacancy rate right now is 402. And if I could for a moment, it was never the department's intention to lay off people. We didn't want to do that. What happened was back in November, we were told by the CAO that we had $11 million deficit in our budget. And after some adjustments, what we said was, and I'll quote from the letter that was written by the chief, if the department were required to immediately resolve this deficit, our only option would be to lay off a significant number of civilian employees. And then it is estimated that logistically the layoffs would not become effective till the last quarter. Due to the time involved in this process, the department is requesting that the discussion regarding our deficit be held and re-examined in February when we have a better idea of the number of sworn personnel who will retire after the first of the year. At that time, we may recognize a surplus in the accumulated overtime account that would enable us to reduce the number of layoffs required. And then it goes on to talk about that. We didn't want to deal with layoffs, but said sort of like, if all else fails, obviously this is what we have to confront. We were told in November we had to come up with a plan. I could have done with what you've heard here and come up with some, let me back up for a second. When I took over preparing the budget with the assistance of our staff, who do a terrific job, I said we want to present the most honest answers we can. And that's what we did. And so, for example, if asked a question, we were given an answer that we could guarantee we could meet. There are savings in our budget that we can come up with. Some of it will depend on what happens with negotiations with the league that are ongoing about certain other payments that have to be made. Some of it depend on, as I do every month, going through every single account we have in our expense account and finding out where we can save money by either deferring payment or reducing the amount that we want. Some of it will come up depending on what our attrition is. And some of it will come up from the fact that we have a hiring plan to hire civilians, which obviously, rather than lay off people, we're not going to hire, which will save over another $1 million or $1.25 million. So there's a number of alternatives, but back in November, we didn't have enough information, so the answer given was, if we have to tell you today, this is sort of what we have to prepare for. We never intended to, do not want to lay off any civilians. We don't have enough civilians. We're already suffering service losses with civilians. We do not want to lay off civilians. And I'm sorry this got in here. There was a lack of communication on our part, and that will be remedied going into the future. And when this gets to the council, we'll have, which I assume will be next week sometime, we'll have a further explanation. But as of today, this letter was dated November 16th. And that's what our response was on November 16th. And if it's anybody's fault about this confusion, it's mine. And I apologize.
Let me ask you one thing then.
Sure.
If we are going forward on November 16th letter, and you're saying all the speculation that may occur, when will it be firm or hard fact of what we know we're going to do and where we are on the deficit? I
would say that in January, the beginning of the year, we'll have a much better idea based on some of the ongoing discussions between the league and the city council, and we'll have a much better idea of our expenses and what our attrition rates are, because as you know, as a former chief of police, there's a great deal of movement at the beginning of the year among the sworn and the civilians.
Is that proposed? I'm assuming we're going to get a report back January.
Yes.
Okay. Then also part of that is going to be hopefully a plan 2 and 3 in case some of these funds aren't forthcoming and things of that nature.
One of the things you'll find out from me is that that's the way I do things. If we can't meet A, then B. If we can't meet B, then C. And we'll present all the alternatives to you so that I don't want to present anything that's pie in the sky. I don't want to present anything that's overestimated. We all understand the department's position in the city's budget, that of the general fund, we're about 1/4 of the employees, I think, and 30% of the budget, of the general fund budget. And or whatever the percentage is. I thought the general fund budget was 4 million, and we're about 4 billion, and we're about 1.17. And I understand that. So I understand that we're all in this together, and we're trying to save every nickel we can as we go through this. When it comes to police, sworn, when we have promotional opportunities, we're holding back so that we can save money in our sworn account. We may have a surplus in our sworn account, but again, it depends on further discussions between the city and the Protective League. So in January, we'll have some, probably the middle, we'll have some more definite, laying out definite alternatives as to how we can meet our deficit, understanding that, for example, on the excessive sick time, we were told, my understanding is we were instructed not to put it in our budget. On the reimbursable overtime, which seems to be a $6.7 million deficit, if you subtract a 9.7 from the 3, we believe we're going to be reimbursed for all that, and that we only put in the small amount in our budget so that to make up for the first quarter of the year, knowing that there's always a lag in being reimbursed. We've collected $4.1 million, which is related to last year's fees. We expect going forward that we're now going to collect for this year. So we tried to present an honest budget that laid that out, and I think that come January we'll have a much better sense where we are on collecting our reimbursable funds, because I think last year we collected 12 million more, 12 million plus, so that we think we're going to get to the number that we think what's reimbursement. The only lag may be at the end when they pay us into the next year. So I think we'll be able to come up with numbers that reduce this substantially without having to lay anybody off. And as you remember, when Chief Beck, I'm tired, when Chief Beck, as can tell by my clumsiness before, when Chief Beck spoke before the Budget Committee last year, he said, we're going to live within our budget, and the last sentence in our letter was, it continues to be our goal to operate within our budget, and that's what our goal is for the year, and we intend to achieve that.
Let me just ask one thing on that reimbursable. What we really need to make sure is that, and it's one thing to get reimbursed, is another, is it going to be before June 30th?
That's what we're working on, and that's why we're constantly monitoring that account.
And then the other thing is, can we expect, from what you said today, that we'll get a different report for council that addresses where we are currently?
I don't know if I can promise that by Tuesday. I can state as our...
Do we know when this is coming to council,
The 15th?
this report?
Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
That's Wednesday. I don't know if we can put all of this together. I know by January we can. What the alternate plans are.
Maybe you could give it a verbal overview to tell us what's different today than November 16th?
Yeah, the main difference is we don't want to lay anybody off, and I don't want to have the hardworking people, the hardest working people in our department feel that they're...
You don't want to drive that car that they're working on.
Especially as one of the world's worst drivers. They've been very good to me, so I wouldn't want to do that. But additionally, it's not fair. It's not fair to create that kind of fear, and it was totally unintentional. And again, I apologize. If it's anybody's fault, it's mine.
Yeah, I just like to put it in a stronger policy position, okay? The civilian workers, the 225 that appear in this report, are essential for the mission. They're as essential as an officer in uniform is to the mission, for two reasons. One, obviously, they provide a function and a job that we need done, okay? And two, if they're not there, then you put a sworn officer in there and you have one less officer on the job. Like we've been complaining that we have 154 able-bodied officers in civilian jobs to begin with. We don't want a single officer in a civilian job, period, 70 cents on the dollar. So philosophically, or just kind of policy-wise, we should say a civilian position that's essential to the mission is essential to the mission as much as a sworn officer is to the mission. That's number one. Number two, and I know the union doesn't like what I say on this one, but to pay overtime at the expense of a civilian worker doesn't necessarily ring well in an economy where when you get laid off, you're fired, you're on the street. And that is a big difference than not getting your your overtime check, which of course I think everybody should get paid for what they do. I think Charlie Beck's done the best job as police that we've had, and he's been very helpful to me in Venice. Don't get me wrong, I got lots of issues there. So you guys have been on the beat. But I think just philosophically, you just ruined a whole bunch of people's holidays by that fear that maybe 224 of them will get fired. And then we know that we can't service those cars ourselves. Who's going to do that kind of work? So I'm just very upset that it got to the point where we came in here today with 2 rooms full of people, and everybody just worried to death that they were going to lose their job. And the logic didn't make any sense to me, because these are essential to the mission, as is a sworn officer. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, and look, I'm a civilian myself, but absolutely I agree, and we always believe that. In fact, I think I have had discussions with some members of the council about the fact that we can't get too thin in civilians because we can't support the department then. And we agree 100%. And as I said, this was a communications breakdown. It should not have been presented the way it was. And again, for the third time, I'll say it was my fault. So I have talked to some of them and told them my view on this. And it's the department's view, and I know it's the chief's view. Every one of those people, of those 225, if that's the number, we believe we need. And we're going to move heaven and earth to make sure we keep them. And that's why when I met with staffs of some of the members of this committee a few weeks ago, and when I've talked to the CAO, what I said was that the letter was written on November 16th the way it was written, but it was never, ever our intention to lay anybody off.
Let me just add one thing. Sandy Jo MacArthur from the Police Department.
Yes, Chief.
The majority of the people that were misrepresented in the letter from the department are mine personally. They work for me.
I see.
I can't do my job without them. And I have said over and over again that the department, and I'm speaking from the sworn side, I personally and the sworn recognize that the department's shared sacrifice has fallen squarely on their shoulders. We can't afford to continue in that vein, and we do recognize that. So when I came in today to see a good majority of my folks taking their time off to come over here to speak, it's hard for me to see it, and it could have been prevented, and it wasn't, and we'll take every step to make sure that we do a better job communicating in the future. But I can't afford to let anybody else go.
That's the 400.
Saying that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's 9,963 sworn officers, correct?
Yes.
And you would like to stay at that number, while the unions don't necessarily say they want to stay at that number, but they want to make sure all present employees are well taken care of. And then we got the civilians in the mix. So we got 3 different discussions on this.
Understood. And what Jerry and I and the chief want to try to do is to continue to work within our budget, bring the gap down, keep all of our sworn, all of our civilian, and work towards improving to the point where we can get rid of our furloughs. That's our goal. That is our ultimate goal, so we can continue to serve the citizens of this great city, as well as we have been able to do over the last 12 to 18 months when things got difficult.
Just if I can add one thing, this department laid off 50 people last year and it was a meeting that Chief MacArthur, myself, and I think some of the other people from the department here, it was the toughest meeting I've had in this department in the 13 years I've been associated with now, since my days on the commission and now working for the department. We all walked out with tears in our eyes. None of us want to go through that again. And that was my statement to the people today, and that's my pledge, is we're moving heaven and earth to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm sorry.
So the 400 or so that the LAPD had originally proposed, at some point the CAO still proposed at 225.
And
so how did that?
Again, that was, they did a reanalysis of what they felt we need, what our deficits were, but that was an answer to a question in November, which...
The 225, not the 400.
449 is what the original number was just the saying, if we had to do it today, this is what we'd have to do.
Okay. But the CAO proposed...
Snapshot in time.
It was a snapshot in time, which, by the way, did not take into consideration any other savings we were making along the way.
But where did the 225 come from?
You'd have to ask the CAO.
The $3 million represents $14 million in savings for next fiscal year. So if the department was facing a $14 million shortfall this year, they have to address that same shortfall next fiscal year. So that was the number they'd have to get to. So originally, the department said, if we have to address a $6 million shortfall from January 1st through the end of the fiscal year, we would have to lay off this many people to generate that kind of savings. They didn't say they wanted to do it, but they said that's what would be necessary to do that. So over the course of the fiscal year, that would be approximately $12 million, not including related costs. So we diminished that number to balance it based on what that cut would look like for a full fiscal year. So the department has come back and said, we can identify the savings necessary to save those people's jobs this current fiscal year, and we will deal with the next year and the funding for those positions in the context of the budget.
And we're going to start those discussions, if not tomorrow, depending on the CAO schedule, Wednesday at the latest. And so we are taking this as a wake-up call to the fact that there's a lot more work to be done, which we were doing as we're doing it, but now we're just going to have to do it a lot faster. And to answer the Councilman Parks' question, we're going to have to get it done so that you're satisfied in January. What we're giving you is real and not some pie-in-the-sky pipe dream, which we're going to have to then address in March, April, May, and June. And we don't want that to happen, as you can see from last year, where this year's budget is $60 to $70 million less than what we spent last year.
Just two things I ask you. When you come back, when we get this to council, if you could just have some verbal comments on this issue of the jail and 90 officers, where that is. And the other issue, just as for all of our health, anytime somebody says don't put a $5 million allocation in the budget, just ignore them and put it in the budget so we know what the real numbers are.
We will, you mean excessive sick time for the officers?
Yeah,
which I assume was part of the contract with the league.
I think it was part of the deferred as part of that negotiation, but $5 million is a lot of money to have to find if you don't have it.
We agree.
Mr. Chair.
And I might say that we also understood that part of our, and you can see from the report that $3 million of our expenses were items everybody knew were not underfunded, but we would have trouble meeting because of the obligations, and we're trying to balance that $3 million by reducing some expenses as we can, because there are certain expenses like cost of prisoners that we can't, and others, but we're trying to reduce them. And as you can see from the budget we presented for this fiscal year, there were no cars, there were no motorcycles, and there was a minimum amount of technology. So the police department above all understands the plight that the city's in and that all of its employees are in, and we're trying to...
Mr. Chair, to clarify, item number 6, what action will the committee be taking given the presentation by the department on that item?
Which one?
They need some time. That's the 225 employees.
No, what we expect is a verbal presentation that will give an up-to-date view of where the department is as opposed to the November 16th letter.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're not approving that today. We're just...
So this is just moving forward.
Yeah, we want to make it clear. I don't want to see any civilians laid off, period.
Then we agree.
And you have to make it work without doing that. Maybe you cut back on some of the other realities of your budget.
Like I said, we're going to try to do everything we can to ensure that happens.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's really important next year. It wasn't, Jerry.
Well, that letter is pretty clear. Yeah. I'm going to take one for the team.
Oh, that is good.
Well, you know, they don't need to have some guys have guys, and everybody else can vote. I mean, enough is enough. This overtime thing, the sick thing. You know, when you add up their perks.
Public Works.
Is
this thing on?
The problem is all that's in MOU right now. You got to get out of it next year.
Yes, I agree. No. But by laying out the groundwork now, we can make things work. Charles Leone.
Bill Roosevelt.
Hey, buddy.
Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Fabulous. And you? Very good. Give her my love, will you?
The next department is Board of Public Works.
Well, the Board of Public Works has identified their deficit, including EAA furlough, change in EAA furlough days, 128,000, 331,000 for paying ERIP incentive payouts, and other salary liability. The department anticipates that their salary savings from vacancies will, achieve the savings to offset these deficits. In addition, they will reduce their current year expenditure for overtime account and other expenses. The next, any questions? No? Okay, the next department is transportation. The department has, again, EA reduction on furlough days, deficit of 417,000, ERIP payout of 2.6 million, and excess sick leave payout of 252,000. And in addition, they have other salary liabilities they've identified of 868,000. However, they've identified and made corrections and reprogrammed work orders to address this issue. So we have a cross-reference in the following page for reprogramming those work orders to correct this deficit. And they also have identified the tool and clothing allowance deficit of 195,000 and other expenses. So the global solution of transferring the money from the UB for 417,000 to mitigate their EA furlough day reduction. In addition, they expect attrition of about 25 positions to save approximately 577,000 this fiscal year. They've also identified other reductions in expense accounts of almost 600,000. They've also proposed transferring salaries as needed, funds of 200,000 to their salaries general account to offset their deficit. They also identified reimbursements for special event services. The second FSR will actually include the action to transfer 489,000 to the department's salaries account. The department anticipates 393,000 in additional reimbursements will be transferred at a future FSR.
Oh, see you later.
They've identified transfer from ATSAC Trust Fund and also, as I mentioned, reprogramming work orders. And lastly, they will transfer 300,000 from a special fund called the Traffic Regulation and Enforcement Trust Fund to pay for salaries of investigation staff assigned to enforcement activities in the Bureau of Franchise and Taxicab Regulation. The city attorney they will ask for city attorney to review the eligible use of this fund.
Let me just ask, do we have an idea when the SPRF 5-year plan is going to come through the committee? Like within a decade? within a decade, or?
It is my understanding that it is supposed to, as part of, we're working on our budget currently, and in conjunction with that, as of the report I got today, it's supposed to be tied in with that. So I would imagine.
Was going with the budget, or is, because we?
No, it's supposed to, the budget needs to match the 5-year plan.
Okay.
And so they have to go in conjunction.
Well, because what I think we asked for is that we get a peek at the 5-year plan for transportation and budget, so we get an idea of whether it encompasses the things we think should be in there, so that we're prepared that then your budget matches what was approved of. So is that, can we get the idea of when we might be able to see that?
I would suffice it to say that I'm pretty sure you're going to see it in January or February. I'm pretty confident
Could you make it January?
Get back to us a bit now.
Yeah, we need to see that, because the budget will come out, what, March?
Yes.
Right, it'll,
April 20th.
yeah, it'll definitely be prior to that.
Okay. March is very good. Any other questions?
I'm just curious, which of course I'm all excited about in many crazy ways of myself, is meters. We're getting in new meters, another 20,000, right? That will generate revenue stream. And we still have parts of the city that have no meters and other parts where they could use more meters. Is there any plans in this whole concept of how we bring in a revenue stream? Because parking enforcement does a great job. I'm real proud of everybody. But I'd like more revenue coming in. Is there any conversations going on as you're putting your budget together to not only do 20,000 more new meters that will work more effectively, but also to put meters in some other councilmatic districts where there are no meters?
Angela Berman, CAO's office. Hi. I spoke with Amir Sadati earlier today, and he reported that he would have more information available on that at this T committee on Wednesday.
Very good, 'cause, yeah, I heard that was coming up. So I want to give some hope to all of us here as we deal with the budget issue that there is some revenue streams out there through the meter system. And I would volunteer a couple of my colleagues' districts to be getting some meters like the rest of us do. Okay, thank you. Doing a great job.
Okay. Next.
The last department we have here is library. The library department, we indicated in the report, had not identified some of their salary liabilities. In fact, they had identified them in the first FSR. These amounts were just not counted as part of the original first FSR deficit. So what this operation plan does is account for those liabilities and also have proposed solutions submitted by the library. The majority of that solution coming from moving funds from their unreserved and undesignated fund balance, which is somewhat equivalent to our UB, moving funds from that account to their operating budget.
I wasn't aware until I read this that they had the ability to basically implement a budget differently than what the budget is.
I believe that
because they have the trust fund or whatever we call it.
Elaine Owen Sanchez, Office of the CAO. The unreserved and undesignated fund balance is basically money that's carried over from prior years, and there was a certain amount of that was accounted for in this year's budget. About $2 million is claimed as revenue. And apparently, at the end of last fiscal year, they had $4 million, and which includes the amount that was put in for revenue, and they said that money can go to increase their appropriations in their salaries account so that they can access this prior year money and spend it toward their salaries.
And let me ask you, do we get a shot at that when it comes through the council, or do they do that?
It's solely within the board's authority to do those transfers.
Okay, but does the council know that they're using their accumulated funds to add positions, or is there any discussion as to whether the council would like to say it should be used in another area, or do they do that separate and apart of the budget?
They do that.
They do that separate and apart, and occasionally there is a report that comes forward. I remember seeing some while I was in the mayor's office, some reports indicating that those transfers had occurred, but not necessarily
I'd like to
requested.
see if the CAO can work this out, that the budget that we approve should match what they're recommending, so we'll know what the true budget is, and not have us approve a budget and then the commission approves something separate and apart than what the council approved. And so I'd like to make sure that there's a meshing of that.
Councilman, I believe that those are rollover funds, and so when the budget comes before you in April, the net amount that is available in the library fund isn't known until the actual closing. So by the time the commission adopts their final budget, they usually have a better estimate in terms of what is left over and rolls over. We have typically used that unreserved and undesignated amount in the budget because there's an estimate when we prepare the budget in April, that there will be a certain amount available to the department. So these are the kind of the monies that would actually stay with the department, and the fact that these monies are now available actually allows the library department to pay for these ERIP payments that they otherwise would have had to make reductions in their department to pay for. So this is actually helpful that
No,
the
I'm not saying
department
it's not helpful. But I just want to be assured that once we pass the budget, if they find that the dollars come in significantly higher and they begin to make judgments on how to spend it, does it come back to the council as to that overage or that rollover money is being spent in this fashion?
Usually, the mayor's office is very good about sweeping those funds to ensure that they're almost always utilized for the upcoming budget. To the extent that there are additional amounts that are left over, I know that the library department in the past has sometime used it to purchase like one-time items like, book materials, et cetera. And that usually doesn't come forward because, technically speaking, those funds are within their authority to use because they're prior year allocations based on the property tax amount. So usually it doesn't come back before you. Of course, we can always report after the year is closed, what the actual amount of the rollover is to the extent we can. Sometimes we don't know what that amount is.
I would just like to be able to know what is in the rollover and how it was spent. It's very similar to what we tasked Housing Authority with when we give them that pilot money. For years, they said thank you, and they never told us what they did with it. And so we started saying, why don't you tell us during the budget how you're spending money that we're deferring to you, because we may not agree with it. Because one year we found at the last minute they were using it for police overtime, and that was never an intent to give them the pilot money to buy police officers overtime. So I would just like to know how we can mesh that together, that's all. Just one more thing to read. Got anything else, any more department?
No, that's it. The recommendations, just to note, the recommendations in the report, back on page 4 of the report, do assume that the reductions and as identified in the operation plan would go forward. So unless there's a obviously different recommendation or instructions, that's what's currently in the report.
So we'll move the CAO report, and our expectation is that 20 million that is still deficit, will resolve that during future FSRs.
Yes.
But again, we'll move that report, those recommendations, and also whatever verbal amendments and requests that we made during the discussion. Okay.
And just to note, as I noted earlier, obviously some of those changes you indicated throughout this process changed the numbers. So I think we'll have to note that.
Now, we didn't make any, if I recollect, any hard changes.
Actually, I should have said the change that I mentioned earlier relative to the city attorneys. Yeah, so that's instead of 19.59, that should be 20.64.
But we'll accept. I think you gave us an amended report for the city attorney.
Yes.
So we'll add that amended report for the city attorney that was given during the meeting.
Right. The attachment 1, we provided the revised attachment 1 to Erica, the clerk, city clerk, and then we'll work with her to change whatever.
I think we want to move the report, but not for LAPD.
I think
it was just the movement of money, that internal movements that we approve. The other discussion has yet to be had.
Well, LAPD, we just said that we would forestall their November 16th report. In place of a verbal report, they're going to bring us with an updated analysis at the council.
Okay. Yeah. So I can say be clear, because recommendation 1 is to approve the service level and reduction of employees. So you'll need to remove
internal movement of monies for ERIP and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's mean we need to amend recommendation number 1.
All right. And then if that's all, before we close, Mr. McQuiston, your public comment will be through. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim McQuiston. Of course, my experience has been working with the Congress, and there's always tension between the two branches, the executive and the legislative, and the judicial is way off in the wilderness. And now we have a charter, which is exactly the same as the president and the Congress. We have council districts, which used to be the bosses and who are now the legislators. And we really need the council people who have fine minds to work on getting our city organized better. And we can't leave it to the mayor to do that, because the mayor cannot do it. You have more minds than the mayor has. And if you guys don't do it, I'm going to be sorry for you. I'd certainly be willing to put in my 2 cents, but it's really up to the council, I think, to take the reins and say, look, we're legislators now. We're not going to do all these constituent problems. We've got to work on the overall plan for the city. And I didn't mention it, but I did mention it to the CAO today, that this report that came out is awful, awful. And not only that, they're using numbers twice. We can't do that. And it's very upsetting to me, because I think we got some crackerjacks there, and I don't understand why this tension in between the two. But I do recognize the fact that unless you guys let go, the mayor is going to take a position which isn't too friendly to the city council. So that's really what I wanted to say on this bit.
Thank you very much. We're adjourned. Oh, man, I think so.